Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на ордів образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 842 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again. And today, we're hearing Russia getting pounded yet again on the air bases, and also Putin is expelling the losses out of his mouth. And it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And we have absolutely massive news today as the Morozovsk airfield was stricken by Ukrainian drones, and it appears that not only have 2 Russian Su-34 fighter bombers have been destroyed, according to today's earlier info, it appears that even multiple other aircraft may have been damaged or destroyed during the attack at Morozovsk airfield. Not only that, but we also got major news of explosions occurring in almost every major Russian city near to the area of Ukraine. We were able to hear reports of explosions in Kursk, Voronezh, and Belgorod, and we were also able to get footage of the explosions that were occurring inside the area of the city of Kursk and Voronezh. Not only that, we also got to see the new Russian defense minister for one of the first times ever on camera, while at the exact same time, the Russian Stock Exchange, the Russian equivalent of the FDIC, amongst many other various financial institutions, appear to have closed their doors today and completely shut off their websites and any access to the outside world beyond their companies, showing that a financial collapse may be pretty close to happening. We're not exactly sure, but we will be covering that information as best we can. We also got a little bit of additional news that Putin has put out some new terms for surrender of the Ukrainian armed forces, or really more so a peace talk, as he calls it, although the terms would be akin to pretty much a surrender or a defeat for the Ukrainian armed forces, which we also will be getting to into a little bit later. Not only that, but we also got to see that Russian forces have been continuing to take very high losses in the battlefields of Ukraine. Not only that, we have also heard a little bit of brewings going on inside of NATO, as we've heard that apparently the Hungarians are being deprived of usual NATO intelligence and information based off of their possible alignment with the Russian Federation, which is also a pretty big bombshell report that came out today. But we have absolutely loads of news to cover over the past 24 hours, and things are really heating up at this point in the war. It's probably one of the most active points in the war that we've seen, and speaking of active, that takes us into the most documented reports of explosions that occurred over the past 24 hours, which was in the area of Morozovsk. Morozovsk is an airfield that is directly within the area of the Rostov Oblast and is a part of the Russians' southern military district. This district is mostly the one tasked with conducting the war inside of Ukraine, and the aircraft that are used mostly by the Russian Federation are Su-34 fighter bombers, and some of these aircraft are based at Morozovsk. Morozovsk has been under attack in the past, although in the past, damage to the airfield appears to have been minimal or not that significant from Ukrainian drone attacks, according to satellite pictures that we were able to find. However, even in these satellite pictures, it is very clear that an entire Su-34 fighter bomber wing is based out of Morozovsk. We can even see that here in this satellite picture taken several months ago. We are also able to see that it appears that a similar Su-34 fighter bomber wing is also based here, but sporting a winter camouflage, which is actually rare in the Russian Air Force. On top of that, however, one of the most clear areas of damage that was caused was this specific paddock in this area of the airfield, which is used for aircraft maintenance and operations, which we can see is already occupied in this satellite picture by two Su-34s, and we can also see that it appears they have an engine testing area right here. This is where the backblast area is. We can also see that they have a specialized tent or a hangar that is used to give a covered area for mechanics to work on the Su-34s. We were able to get footage showing us that a strike did occur on the Morozovsk airfield and that significant damage had been caused. We can see two pictures here of the smoke and fire that was caused at the airfield, and moving on from those two pictures more so, and of course the geolocation that was included there, we also got to see more pictures and footage of the airfield under attack under the past 24 hours. We can see the smoke rising here as well as a fire, a very large fire that is occurring on the airfield. We can also see that as well from a much farther distance, and then not only that, we can also hear the sound of the Ukrainian drone, or one of them, that came in and struck the Morozovsk airfield, and here's the clip. You can hardly hear it.
A menacing sound of a lawnmower once again.
Man, dude, that's how the local alcoholic be sounding, pulling up on his whip. He's pulling up on that lawnmower. But anyways, you hear it flying off on into the distance, and that was one of the drones that did end up attacking Morozovsk. We can also see a satellite picture once again from Google Maps, pretty much the exact one we're using on stream, showing the airfield. Now, it is time for us to actually get into the damage assessment and the damage report at Morozovsk post-attack. We were able to see that two Su-34 fighter bombers, specifically within the repair hangar, within the repair paddock, which we can see right here, appear to have been destroyed. A drone was able to hit onto the top of the roof, causing a significant explosion and subsequent fire, and we can see the faint outlines of Su-34 fuselages inside of this hangar, but most noticeably, we can also see that the color is slightly charred and grayed, meaning that these aircraft have sustained fire damage and may have been knocked out from the strikes, much like the Su-57 Felons that we saw stricken at the Armavir, or more so the what in the hell was the name of that airfield, Matthew, way down in southern Russia? Because I know the name of it. It's like the Armtavovsk airfield or something along those lines. Actually, it's the Avdiivka airfield. They are destroyed and show similar char burns to the Su-57s that were seen down here. And they were actually seen on this specific part of the airfield, exactly where they're seen on Google Maps. This is showing us once again that two Su-34 fighter bombers have been confirmed to be knocked out so far and possibly even destroyed. But we also got an additional large lens satellite picture of this airfield, which is very telling, as it shows that it may not be the only two aircraft that were destroyed. There are burn splotches across the entire length of this one area of the ramp off the runway. And if we look at that on satellite footage, there isn't any major burn spots like these anywhere on the runway at all. And this satellite footage here from Google Maps was taken sometime early this year, around February, from what we believe. And we are not seeing any major burn spots there. But however, when you look here, there is clearly major burn spots in about 3 different locations on the tarmac. We can also see that there was some kind of a fuel spill up on the repair paddock, and then we can once again see the destroyed structure that was over the repair area that appears to largely show us that it may have not been just a single drone. It may have been multiple Ukrainian drones that ended up attacking the airfield and causing a very substantial amount of damage to the Russian Air Force forces that are in this area. So going off of that, it appears that the Ukrainians have had a massive success overnight at Morozovsk. And it does seem as though the Ukrainian drone attacks are not only ramping up in their intensity, but they're also greatly increasing in the amount of successes that they're able to have. And it's also giving us an idea that the Russians may have absolutely no air defense inside the Russian Federation. Usually, in most instances, we would see that there would be some sort of anti-air fire based at these airfields in particular that would protect the aircraft that are stationed there. So far, at Avdiivka and Morozovsk and other airfields that have been attacked so far, we are seeing absolutely no major air defense. The only time that we've seen air defense, and even then it was inactive, was around the area of the Belgorod airfield, where we do know that one S-300 and one S-400 air defense batteries, well, really 2 air defense batteries, one in S-300 and one in S-400, were destroyed by Ukrainian ground-to-ground fire. However, we're not seeing the same case inside the Russian Federation, showing that the entirety of the interior of Russia has been stripped of anti-air defenses at this point, and they have been moved into Ukraine or into the very near border regions of Belgorod to conduct a very light defense of their airspace. This is, once again, painting, and I cannot stress this enough, a very dire picture for Russian defenses and Russian defense forces going forward, and it is showing that the Ukrainians are able to have free reign on whatever Russian targets they pick and choose, as long as they are able to make it through the initial air defense perimeter, which is inside of occupied Ukraine. If they are able to bypass that, they can truly target anything anywhere inside the Russian Federation and have an incredibly high chance of success, most likely somewhere within the 80 to 90 percentile. But moving on from that and into the city of Kursk, speaking of more explosions that were happening inside of Russia, we were able to see that more major explosions were happening inside of Kursk. We still do not have a lot of info on what these explosions were, but they were extreme. You can actually hear one right there. They were extremely loud. I mean, unbelievably loud in the middle of the city. We do not know, once again, what the target was. The Russian Federation has not published any information, and we have not been able to get any open source intelligence on what this may have been that was hit by a Ukrainian drone, but we are able to confirm that there are impacts and explosions within the major city of Kursk, which we can hear in this clip right here.
Damn. It rearranged the city and the eardrums.
Man, then they got those little slide whistles going on, man. They're going whoop, whoop. But anyways, moving on from that and on to our next clip. We hear the explosion from afar. And also we hear a secondary one there at the end. And then finally, we could see the smoke plume rising from one of the explosions that happened way later in the day. So going off of all of this, we are getting an idea that Kursk has been under attack over the course of the day. We did not hear any reports of air defense fire or air defense missiles attempting to intercept these targets over the city, possibly showing that Kursk has no usable or active air defense at the moment, and the only explosions that we did hear appear to have been ground-based and hitting targets around Kursk. Kursk is a military city for the most part in this war and has been used to transport and equip Russian forces further on down the line. So going off of that, this city is a strategic target, and the Ukrainians are most likely attempting to knock out either a communications hub, a logistics depot, or maybe transiting Russian forces, or even, for that matter, a large civilian rail yard inside of Kursk. And a lot of people are going to be saying, well, why in the world do you point out it's a civilian rail yard? Well, all rail yards in their natural state are civilian rail yards, like this one right here at the Kursk railway station. However, they still transport every kind of cargo throughout the Russian Federation, both civilian and military. And so going off of that, these rail yards are usually major strategic targets. However, there is one thing that makes attacking these specific rail yards incredibly difficult, is that in the Soviet style of railroad construction, usually the rail yards are actually right near the major railway stations for the civilians. And it's usually the case as that in other cities, such as Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, where we have actually seen in the past Russian missiles slamming down onto railway stations and killing dozens of Ukrainian civilians. The reason why we believe that those missiles ended up hitting the railway station, looking back in hindsight, is because the Russians were attempting to hit the rail yard, but then ended up directly aiming them at the railway station. Still a war crime, but showing why there is a little bit of complexity with attacking rail yards really anywhere within Eastern Europe, as most of them were built in the Soviet style, where the rail yards were built directly onto the railroad stations for the civilians. But nevertheless, still showing a little bit of what the possible target inside of Kursk may have been. It may have also been the Kursk airport, although I doubt that this is, well, actually, I'm completely wrong. We can actually see that a Russian air wing is based out of the Kursk airfield. Not only that, a helicopter wing as well. And so they could have been attacking the Kursk airport, although we don't have really good enough information at the moment to tell y'all what was the target in Kursk. We can only confirm that there were explosions within the area of the city, and that's about it. Beyond that, it would just be mere supposition about what the actual targets were and what the damage really is. But moving on from the city of Kursk and on out into Voronezh, we were also able to see that attacks occurred inside of Voronezh as well, and we were able to hear that on security camera, also with some absolutely sick beats. Here is the clip.
Yeah! Oh. Would you like a side of music with your explosion?
Bro, they were absolutely vibing out there, man. They're like, it's like, oh damn. But anyways, moving on from that into the second clip. And of course the car alarms are going off. And we hear that famous siren at the end, but still showing explosions happening inside of Voronezh. We also got reports of explosions that occurred within Belgorod. Unfortunately, we were not able to find any video evidence of that on the internet, so all we have are the reports, and we can't really report that as an actual news fact because we don't have video or picture evidence to back up that assertion. But nevertheless, we did hear about it, and considering that explosions did happen in Kursk and Voronezh, which are both considerably farther away from the border than Belgorod, we are going to assume that those reports are accurate. It's just that we don't have any video or picture evidence to back that up. Nevertheless, the damage that has been caused today, we can see, is specifically in the area of Morozovsk, has been severe. We do not know the extent of damage inside of Voronezh or Kursk on military targets or possible critical civilian infrastructure. That we do not know at the moment. But one thing is certainly clear: the Ukrainian drone attacks are ravaging the Russian Federation, especially near the border region of Ukraine, and it does appear that today has been a serious bout of failure, really, for Russian air defense, and it is really showing us that the Russian air defense may not exist. I say this time and time again every single night, but it's such an important thing to always observe and note. And every single one of these attacks is not only conducting actual damage against the Russian Federation, it is pulling us vital reconnaissance and information about Russian air defense abilities. And from what we're getting over the course of these 6 months, Russian air defense abilities are not increasing inside the Russian Federation over this time. They are actually decreasing. We are seeing that far more attacks at this point are successfully making their way into the Russian Federation and hitting their targets than they were at the beginning of the year, back when they were attacking the oil refineries. Going off of that, we are getting a very clear indication the Russian Federation is not doing that well on a military aspect. However, this has not stopped the Russian Federation, specifically Vladimir Putin, from putting out new terms for peace, as it's called. And we were able to hear them today. So, really quickly, this kind of caps a little bit of it, but I want to recap some of the things that this does not include. As a new condition to start negotiations, Ukraine has to withdraw all troops from the entirety of the following oblasts: Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia. All 4 of those oblasts, the Ukrainian forces will have to completely retreat out of them, and then, and only then, will peace talks begin. That is something that is pretty wild, because I want to put this into perspective for everyone. And let me use the Deep State map to do this a little bit better. Deep State shows, in all of these examples, where the oblast borders are in Ukraine. And there are a lot of oblasts. There is the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, or I believe that is actually called, yeah, I believe that is the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. And then we have the Zaporizhia Oblast, we have the Kherson Oblast, we have the Odessa Oblast, then we have the Ternopil Oblast, I believe this is, and then you have the Kiev Oblast, which just makes up the city of Kiev, and you have a load of others. There are an endless amount of oblasts inside of Ukraine. But nevertheless, the ones that the Russians want the Ukrainians to withdraw completely out of is Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. And one thing that a lot of you will notice is that the Ukrainians control half of the Donetsk Oblast, about a third of the Zaporizhia Oblast, and about a third of the Kherson Oblast as well. And not only that, there are many major cities that still lie within Ukrainian control inside of these oblasts. Just to name the largest ones, the city of Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Kramatorsk and Slovyansk are still in Ukrainian control and inside of these oblasts. What the Russians are demanding to even open up an avenue for peace talks right now is that the Ukrainians withdraw from all of these oblasts, give up all of these major cities and all of the land in these oblasts, and only then can they talk about peace. And even then, the peace talks might not even work out. And then moving on from that, a part of the actual demands that the Russians have already laid forward in the peace deal is that, one, the Ukrainians can never join NATO. They have to make that very clear. Two, Ukraine has to tell Western nations to lift every single sanction that is put on the Russian Federation, and to also relinquish and give the Russian assets that have currently been frozen inside the West back to the Russian Federation. Another thing that the Russian Federation will be able to achieve, and this has been hinted, and I've not really seen this confirmed to be true, is some sort of reparations from Ukraine. And all of this really, to be quite honest, all of these terms are really more so a terms of surrender for Ukraine if they were to accept these than anything, meaning that they've already been shot down by Zelensky. Zelensky has said that these terms are completely unacceptable and the war will continue, because this would be paramount to accepting defeat at this point, and the Ukrainians are not doing that poorly in this war. They're doing quite well, so why accept defeat when the war is, of course, going back in Ukraine's favor? All of this, once again, is not looking too well, and of course, but however, it is buying some attention out there and some sympathy, saying, look, the Russians are a peaceful people. They're trying to get peace with the Ukrainians. And of course, when you really read the actual text, it's not really a peace, it's more so a terms of surrender, which is going to, of course, be unacceptable to the Ukrainians. But nevertheless, a lot of people have been wondering, what is this ceasefire negotiation attempting to achieve? Because while Putin is making it sound a lot like terms of surrender, he also did say that if Ukrainian forces withdrew from those oblasts, he would immediately tell the Russian army to cease fire, and it would pretty much enter a state of stagnation inside of Ukraine. There would not be an active fighting war happening at that point, which is something that is a little interesting, because it's never really been offered in the past for the Ukrainian army to exist. They just have to move out of several oblasts. Usually the terms to enter a peace negotiation up until now have been from the Russian side that the Ukrainian army has to lay down its arms and practically surrender for peace negotiations to begin. That's usually been the prerequisite. It has changed, however, but a lot of people are wondering, what is this? And a lot of people actually are thinking that Putin is just trying to buy some time. The situation is bad right now. The military situation and the economic situation are devolving into a very pitiful state. And if the Russians can just buy some time, and not only that, gain ground in an attempt to negotiate peace, they can actually end up on a better footing once the war begins again than they were at the start right now. Some people are saying that Putin is doing it only for show, so that way people in the West will hear that the Russians are attempting peace, and all that they really hear, because a lot of people aren't really paying a lot of attention to this war, is that the Russians gave Ukraine a peace deal because they love lives and they want to save people and not have a terrible war going on, and then the Ukrainians refused that peace deal, because that's what a lot of people have been hearing over the course of the day. Some people are saying that Putin really wants to end the war, and he's just that desperate to end it, although I kind of had to disagree with that off the top of my head, because the terms are unacceptable already. They're very harsh. And then some people are a little bit unsure about this, but nevertheless, seeing the seriousness of the situation and seeing what a lot of people are saying really on all sides. But Matthew, what are people saying about this Putin peace terms that came out today? Are they saying they're good, bad? Are they saying that he's trying to buy time? Maybe try and make it look like the Ukrainians are the bad guys because they're not wanting to accept peace? And what are you thinking about it?
All right, so it looks like 62% of the audience said Putin is simply trying to buy some time, while 21% said Putin is doing it just for show, and 12% said Putin really wants to end the war. And in my opinion, I don't think Putin really wants to end the war whatsoever. His objective going into Ukraine was to take the entire country. So until that objective is actually seen all the way through, this war is simply not going to end. Even if there was a temporary ceasefire, Putin would simply use that time to regroup, put his forces back into Ukraine even more powerful then to take more territory. So in my opinion, I'm with the 62%. I think Putin is trying to buy some time here. And of course, we have seen those reports that the attack on Kharkiv here recently has caused significant, humongous, and major losses amongst the Russian troops, and Russia can't afford to keep that up. So what Putin is trying to do here is simply trying to rearm his troops and get some more into the battlefield to throw them into the meat grinder. So Ukraine was very smart to reject this negotiation ceasefire because it would only benefit Russia. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that these terms are completely unacceptable, and not only that, they're absolutely insane. They're nuts. To put this out there, because there's a lot of wordage that's used nowadays to really try and make things seem like they're not really what they are. Putin did not come out with a peace deal today. What this is a terms of surrender. That's really what this is once you look at it on its surface, because it requires that the Ukrainians retreat and give up land, and then secondly, in the actual terms, it pretty much moots everything that Ukraine is attempting to achieve on their end in this war and what the Western sphere is attempting to achieve in the war as well. Meaning that, in short, if this peace deal, as it's being called, was accepted, this would be a defeat, meaning that this is a terms of surrender or a peace treaty that would end in defeat. This is something that will not be acceptable either to Ukraine or their Western backers like the United States and the rest of NATO, because we are already seeing that things are starting to turn in the direction of the West again. American support, most importantly at this moment, is topping European support and beginning to give Ukraine that upper hand fighting advantage that they need currently inside of this conflict. That is a very important thing, and it is really the turning point of the war once again, and bringing the war back into Ukraine's favor instead of the Russian favor. This, not only that, is accompanied with massive sanctions that the United States and Europe has put on the Russians, which are starting to cause economic despair again within the Russian Federation, and once again putting the economy and the government within a very fragile position. Both the economic and the military side of things put together, right now, the West is in the advantageous position. Meaning that to accept deals like this that end up putting the West at a severe disadvantage and not achieving anything that we are wishing or looking for is only a disservice to ourselves, because currently there is so much potential for the West and Ukraine to do far better in this conflict than we've seen in the past. And so going off of that, Putin is certainly trying to buy time, and he's seeing that right now. He's seeing that momentum is starting to move towards the West, and he's trying to see if they can even entertain peace negotiations, because not only will they be able to gain ground, a big plus for the Russians once the war begins again, but they are able to stop the war while Western momentum is at its greatest in this conflict right now. And that means that he is able to ride out the momentum until it dies down, and then the war will start again. And not only that, it gives Russia breathing room to try and go around the world and try and find some financial backers or military backers for the Russian conflict. This may allow them to build up more arms and stockpiles from North Korea, possibly help them to be able to get financial support from the Chinese, possibly even try and stir up other conflicts around the world in the meantime, being able to divert their time and attention elsewhere during that moment to try and draw American forces into places like the Middle East more so, maybe into Syria again, or maybe into other far-flung areas of the world, possibly even put attention on Cuba instead, and then use Cuba as a diplomatic negotiating chip to make sure that U.S. support doesn't really exist once the peace deal or the peace talks fall apart and the war begins again. We do have to remember that the Russians are attempting a war of deception for the most part. Of course, they're not really masters of it like the Chinese or the United States really would be, but they are attempting one. And not only that, they are able to project a little bit of soft power, because I was actually out and about today, out in the world, and one interesting thing that I heard was that the Russians had given Ukraine a peace deal, and this was from a certain person that I ran into today, and I'll just tell y'all what I heard and how they're taking it, and I'm assuming that they don't really read the actual articles too much, they just read the headlines. But they said Putin has given Ukraine a peace deal because he actually loves the people of the world and he wants them to live because they're such good, wonderful people, and he's against the collective evils of the West. And so he gave a peace deal to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are refusing it because Zelensky is a devil when asked for salary, and he's a terrible guy, and he wants everyone dead, and he wants the whole entire Western world dead on top of it. So he refused a peace deal because he hates people and he wants them dead. That's the way that guy took it. Which I would have to assume that he did not really read any more than the headline, because if you read anything beyond the headline, you clearly see that that's not the case. And so, going off of that, it would be quite clear to me that this is nothing more, if anything, not trying to buy time. It's also a propaganda attempt to try and make sure that Western countries see this. Because let me be honest here. I've been in this for 842 days now. I believe 842 days exactly now covering this war. And in that time of doing this for about 2.5 years, I've been able to get an excessive amount of experience looking at how the public reacts to information. And one thing that I've found out, and of course this doesn't apply to this channel and any of y'all, because of course y'all pay attention to the news and listen to it, but one thing I've found is that most people are very reactionary and don't really read a lot or do a lot of research, and they take things at face value. Someone can tell them something and they will just believe it for the most part, even if it is a very summarized or very misconstrued version of reality or the facts. And so the Russians are getting the upper hand right now in how the story is being spun, because they are, for the public's purposes, giving out a peace deal. And who wouldn't want peace? Wouldn't everyone want to end a war? I mean, only a sick bastard would want to see people continue to get killed on a front line. But then they see that Zelensky is refusing this peace deal immediately, as it's being said. And this is all a very, very elaborate way that the Russians have worded this, and also how the peace deal, as really the terms of surrender, is laid out, because it's an unacceptable term by Ukraine. And it's once again leading a lot of the public to believe, that doesn't really pay too much attention to either the news about this peace deal or any news about the war in general, that the Ukrainians are a bloodthirsty group not wanting to try and get any sort of a peace. They're just wanting to continue to fight. And that's another thing that Putin may be trying to achieve, going with a smaller amount of people who voted on that poll, who said that, I think it was like 20% of y'all or so, that said that he is trying to put on a bit of a show. And I think it may be an attempt at a show as a secondary objective. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, because it is very clear, very evident to me that that would be a attempt by the Russian Federation, either by time or to put on a show for the West, to make average folks who don't really pay too much attention to the war make it look like the Ukrainians are bloodthirsty and the Russians are actually the good citizen, good neighbor type that are trying to bring peace because they love life, or something along those lines. But moving on from that and into the rest of the Russian Federation, we have been able to hear that the Moscow exchange went down today. It got shut down. People tried to access the website, and it is off. It is literally off. This is the Moscow Exchange website, and it is down, completely offline. And not only that, but the National Settlement Depository and National Clearing Center websites are also down as well. And dang, thank you, Tony, for the massive support.
Hey, thank you.
Tony! Thank you for the support. That is massively appreciated. But nevertheless, we are seeing that while this channel is reaching financial prosperity thanks to Tony, the Russians are not reaching financial prosperity. And it does appear that even the Russian equivalent of the FDIC, which we're looking at their website right here, which is completely down, appears to be having a little bit of a tip-off. What we believe...
Raggy, we're having trouble finding that site, and they're also having trouble finding your money too, apparently.
Man, man, the way you said that, though, you're like, look, I don't know who you are or where you are, but maybe you should start changing your ways. Or better yet, changing your names. But beyond that, that's the way you said that. But the Russian equivalent of the FDIC is down, and we believe that it's a tip-off. Because the FDIC, well, we're going to call this the FDIC because that will make a lot of sense for about half of our audience, which are Americans, and many of y'all will know what the FDIC is. And to quickly explain this for everyone else, the FDIC is the Federal Deposit Insurance Commission, I believe is what that abbreviation stands for, which is the commission in the United States that is responsible for insuring your bank accounts. Inside the United States, every single individual in this country is able to have $250,000 insured by the FDIC. That means if the bank that your money is in collapses, you can go to the FDIC and they will give you however much money you had, it was insured if it was in that bank. So if you had $75,000 in the bank, you're going to get $75,000 from the FDIC. It goes all the way up to $250,000. So if you have $300,000 in a bank in America and that bank collapses, you are not going to be getting $300,000 from the FDIC if it was all in a single bank account. You're only going to be getting $250,000 back because that is the insurance cap that the FDIC puts out. This is the Russian equivalent of that, and they only insure 1.4 million rubles, which sounds like a lot until you hear that that's only 15,000 US dollars, which is just a little over a year's worth of average income in the Russian Federation. This website is already down, and no banks have collapsed at this point as we're covering this news. This is leading us to believe that the Russian FDIC has been given the tip-off that major banks may be in the state of collapse at the moment that will be leading people to this website to try and get their insurance payouts for the bank collapses. And so as a preemptive action, they're already shut down, and they are not allowing anyone on the website at all to even look at it at the moment, even before a bank has collapsed. And a lot of people have been saying that this is not good, especially for the Russian Federation. This probably is the beginning of the end for the financial institutions that keep Russia alive, because it would be one thing to see the banks' websites go down, which we have seen, and it would be another thing to see the stock exchange go down, because we've actually seen that before in the war. But the Russian equivalent of the FDIC, from what we can remember and from what I could tell, we have never seen the Russian FDIC's website go down, which is leading us to believe that they have been tipped off and they're already preempting the onslaught that's coming economically by shutting down early. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the area of Moscow. And we're going to be moving into another statement that that Putin has made today before I move us on down into the area of Ukraine. Putin has claimed that 700,000 Russian soldiers are deployed in Ukraine, which is about 60% of the entirety of the Russian Federation's armed forces. And a lot of people are wondering, is that actually true? And the small people are saying that it sounds about right. So a decent amount are unsure. A lot of y'all are saying that's probably less than that. And some people are saying that it's probably more than that. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that, really? Do they think that that number is high, low, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so Putin says the number of troops deployed in Ukraine is 700,000. That is a tremendous number. Like, even for the Russians, that is huge. It looks like 58% said it's probably less than that, while 23% said it sounds about right, and 8% said no, it's probably more than that. And when I first heard the number, I was like, damn, that is a massive number. But at the same time, that might be the actual number of troops that have been deployed in Ukraine. But how many of those troops are still alive? That's the question to me, because Putin has to replace the dead troops that keep getting killed on the battlefield. And I think 700,000 might be the number of dead plus the alive ones. So they're recruiting more to put over there. So to me, I would say that's probably more than that because he's having to put more on the battlefield as the days go by. So I'm actually with the 8%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it most likely is a, let me think. Well, it couldn't be an accurate number. It couldn't be. Because maybe, let's say that they're all living. Now, if they're all living, that means that there is 200,000 combat troops involved in the war currently, which would be a fairly decent number to assume, because there are only so many soldiers that you can put on a front line, and that takes a little bit of explaining. There's this thing called troop density, which means that there is a certain amount of soldiers per a certain amount of area on the front line. So over a 1 mile area of the front line, there will be maybe a battalion, which is 800 guys in that 1 mile area. Although in real life, the actual dimensions of the battlefield are a lot larger. So a battalion would probably cover several miles of a front line. So going off of that, 200,000 would seem to be an accurate number for the combat troops. That means that he's saying there's about 400,000 guys that are involved in logistics or just sitting around on their thumbs behind the lines really doing nothing at this point. And then I'm finding it a little bit hard to believe because the Russian logistics system, as we still understand, is not really in the Russian military for them to have a large number of support forces like that. So we already know that a lot of those wouldn't be support forces. Most of that's done by civilian contractors, or it is done by the Russian Railroad Logistics Division, which isn't really that large, and it never really would be that large even in a major war like this. So going off of that, highly unlikely. It's going off of the amount, if we're saying that they're all not alive, including the dead, maybe so, because that would mean that there's about 500,000 wounded and killed, that have been in the Ukraine war, and then there's still another 200 or so, 1,000 or so combat troops in Ukraine. So that sounds as though that would make a little bit more sense. But nevertheless, that is a bizarre number to put out, 700,000. But to put it into perspective, the Ukrainian armed forces, according to public information, is larger than 1 million strong right now. Like actual active members of the armed forces of Ukraine, it is over 1 million, according to their numbers. But at the same time, for the Russian Federation to be dedicating 700,000 soldiers into this war, if that's what he's really saying, that means that the Russians are doing very badly. Like, just to put that out there, because the Russians are putting almost the weight of their entire army now, according to Putin's statement, onto the Ukrainians, and they're still holding. That shouldn't be happening. Like, the Russian army was as good as they say it is, which it isn't, we already know that. But if it was as good as the Russians say it is, wouldn't putting pretty much the entire weight of the Russian army onto Ukraine, wouldn't that make them lose in a very short amount of time? It seems as though it would to be. It's more of a rhetorical question. It kind of would. So I don't really believe that, to be entirely honest. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And Don C said, how do you read comments and speak at the same time? Great question. I've just learned how to do it over 842 days. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are now going to be rolling on into the Ukrainian news inside of Ukraine, inside of occupied Ukraine, inside of the actual territory controlled by Ukraine, and then we'll also be covering a little bit of news over in Hungary as well, although it's not really that important in the big picture. It still is something worth noting. It's something worth talking about a little bit. But before we move on into our location unknowns, and we have some pretty interesting looking ones today, I want to make sure that we address a couple of questions. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our first question of the night is going to go to Tony Snedcore, who put in that generous $100 donation. Massive support, the biggest of the night, actually, and huge shout out to Tony for that support. And they said, how do you think this war will end and when? And what will happen to Putin?
That is a great question, Tony, and I got to thank you for the unbelievably massive support. Folks like you, I cannot thank you enough for putting in unbelievable support like that, because it helps this channel to keep on running. Usually the summer months on this channel over the past 2 years have been a little bit of a low time for this channel in terms of support. So support like that is greatly appreciated, and we thank you so much for that, because that is absolutely unbelievable and helps us to be able to keep this thing running. So a huge thank you to that. So to answer the question, how much longer will the war last? And Tony, really quickly, dude, I hate this, man. It doesn't allow me to see the actual super chats anymore in the control room. So really quickly, let me go to Outlook, because I want to make sure that I answer those 3 questions one at a time. So let me go to my email, and let me go and pull up the spreadsheet.
Oh, you're trying to get the spreadsheet. I was like, pull up Outlook. I'm like, man, it's your emails.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to that spreadsheet. So let's see. How do you think this war will end and when? And what will happen to Putin, or Pooty, as Tony called it. That's pretty good. So, how and when the war will end. I will be entirely honest with all of y'all. On an analysis level, I do not believe that the war can be won with a decisive victory on the battlefield anymore. I just do not think that that's the case. Because while the Ukrainians are conducting a counterattack in the area of Vovchansk, I'll be entirely honest, they're not really making that much progress on a day-to-day basis right now, although this counteroffensive has been going on for about a week and a half now. They have partially retaken Hleboke. It appears that our information that the whole of Hleboke had been retaken was a little bit premature. They've taken about half of Hleboke. They're still fighting for Lukyantsy. They have not been able to push out Voronezh, and the Russians are still holding the meatpacking plant, although they are conducting counterattacks. And that would be the weakest area of the Russian front line. And we are seeing that really neither side at this point is able to really uproot the other from defensive positions and push them away. I'll be entirely honest with y'all. And so going off of that, we know that the Ukrainians will not be able to win a decisive victory on the battlefield anymore against the Russian army and then win the war by retaking ground or encircling a Russian army and forcing them to surrender. That most likely will not happen. The chances of that at this point are incredibly low. This means that the war has really moved more so from a focus on the battlefield into a focus on the peripheries around the battlefield, which would be the Ukrainian economic situation, the Russian economic situation, and the resource situation as well. And the resource situation is a wildly important factor in this entire conflict. Going off of that and talking about that a little bit more, the Ukrainians are doing quite well because it's not really... it's not really that the Ukrainians and the Russians are doing perfect and they're doing even greater and stronger than they were before the war, because wars naturally on an economic level are a degrading or consuming force, meaning that they will eventually wear away at your economy until you're completely bankrupt. It is very expensive and it is very dangerous to start a war, especially when you're in a financial position not to start one. And so going off of that, the Ukrainians, at this point, are degrading economically at a slower speed than the Russian Federation is, and that's been the case throughout most of the war, from what we can tell. The Russian Federation does not really have any financial backers that are helping them to float their economy. The Ukrainians have an excessively high amount of financial backers, like the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, as well as Poland, that not only are helping the Ukrainian economy, they're also helping out the Ukrainian military as well, which is all an incredibly good thing. But that also means that while the war is wearing Ukraine down, as it naturally will every country, it is wearing down Ukraine at a slower speed than the Russians are being worn down. And that's what I've been talking about for most of the year, is that there is almost a ticking time bomb at this point, because if it wasn't for the United States continuing its support, the Ukrainians most likely would have lost this war and the Russians would have won, because the Ukrainians would have had to have tapped out, because their economy would have degraded at a faster speed than the Russians, meaning that the war would have ended around the end of this year in a possible Russian victory, with them claiming the actual southeastern areas of Ukraine. However, with Western support now flowing back in, it is very clear at this point that the Russians are now on the short end of the stick and will not outlast the Ukrainians. This means that economically, like we're already seeing right now, we're still getting very clear indicators that the Russian economy is in an incredibly fragile state and maybe on the verge of collapse even right now. The Russian economy will probably collapse by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. Not only that, but the Russian Federation also is running out of military equipment, and we can just kind of summarize that as a whole, that their military equipment is just running out. The tanks, the APCs, and even trucks in some instances appear to be in very short supply, which is showing us that the Russian army is on the very edge of breaking, just due to the amount of losses that they're taking and the amount of reinforcements they require. And the Russian war industry is not capable of meeting that demand. Going off of that, and then finally, the Russian oil situation is dire. It's terrible. We see that the Russian oil is hemorrhaging at the moment because the Ukrainians have stricken refineries, leading the Russians to be in a several 100,000 barrel deficit per day of usable fuel goods, meaning that throughout the entirety of this year, they've been eating into their strategic fuel reserves, which we believe can only last a little bit longer before they completely implode, which once again will be by the end of this year or the very beginning of next year. So going off of all of this, it does seem as though the war will end in the end of this year or the beginning of next year, and it will most likely end in a Ukrainian victory. Now, I've seen a lot of people in the chat who have been a little bit dismayed by my statement about the Ukrainians not being able to defeat the Russians decisively on the battlefield anymore, and many people have said, well, that's not true. I believe that that will happen. And it's possible it will happen, but to be quite honest with y'all, if the Ukrainians ever broke through decisively, and I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm saying it's highly unlikely, especially given the current conditions, they most likely would do that at the very end of the war. Especially if the Russians start going into financial collapse, we will probably see that the Russian army in Ukraine is no longer being paid, and because of that, their will to fight completely drops through the floor, because pay is one of the highest morale motivators for the Russian Federation at this point. So if they don't get pay, they're going to give up, and then you will see that the Ukrainians get major breakthroughs. But it's not going to be by military prowess alone, to be entirely honest with all of y'all, because I will give y'all a couple of examples where we have seen that the Ukrainians are not necessarily capable of defeating the Russian army on the field. And I'll also give the fair statement already. The Russians cannot defeat the Ukrainians on the field either in an offensive battle. The best example I can give of the Ukrainians not being able to beat the Russians is in the Zaporizhia front, near to the Surovikin line. This was an offensive action that we believe would have been wildly successful back in the middle part of 2023. And we believed that the Ukrainians were going to punch straight through Rabotne, right down the highway to Tokmak. We knew they were going to take Tokmak, and then they were going to advance and speed on down into Melitopol, splitting the land bridge in two. Now, that was a very realistic expectation at the time. We saw that the Ukrainians were being equipped with a massive amount of Western equipment. Not only that, it had been given a massive amount of Western doctrinal training and strategy. And so when this offensive began, we thought that this was going to go incredibly well. But the Russians have dug in so thoroughly, especially in an area like this, it really was not going to be likely that the Ukrainians could punch through. But at the same time, the Russians also cannot punch through either, because they are currently actually conducting an offensive at Staromyorsk at the moment, and they are taking unbelievably heavy losses and gaining no ground. And so to be quite honest with y'all, this almost looks, and I'm going to be entirely honest, and we have a very good example of this just on a visual level, this war has evolved into being the 21st century First World War. The front lines are completely stagnant. We don't really see a lot of changes either in Ukraine's favor or in Russia's favor, and it does appear that this is World War I. And the best example I can give you all of this on a visual level that will really put this all together is the Severonsky Forest, which is also called the Kremenna Forest. We all look at that every once in a while on this channel, and all of y'all say the same thing when we look at the pictures. Wow, that looks like the Somme in World War I, or that looks like Verdun in World War I. And that's because the front lines are not moving anymore. The Ukrainians can counterattack on the Russians, the Russian defenses will hold, the Russians will counterattack on the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainian defenses will hold. And from what we can tell, the Ukrainians will take far less losses in their offensive actions because they know when to fold, when it's right. You know, if they see they're taking heavy losses, it would be idiotic to continue on an offensive, so they usually cut it off early. But the Russians will keep going until their units are operationally exhausted. And so going off of that, usually the offensive actions taken by the Russians are far more costly than they are for Ukraine. But nevertheless, you can see the examples I'm giving here. There is really no decisive victory to be had on the battlefield anymore in this war. It does appear that that will remain stagnant until the end, which means we need to focus on where the war can be won. And that's really the thing. I'm seeing a lot of people still insisting, no, the war can be won on the battlefield. The thing is that it can be. I mean, y'all aren't wrong. It can be won on the battlefield. It's just going to be that it would be near impossible or very costly. And that means that we need to move our attention into other avenues that the war can be won in that may not have to pertain with actually decisively defeating the Russians on the battlefield, which would be defeating them on the economic level or on the domestic level, which is what the Ukrainians are already really shifting their focus into right now. That's also why y'all will see that the Ukrainians are not focusing anymore on a procurement side of things for tanks and other kinds of frontline weaponry anymore. They are actually looking for air defense systems because their defensive strategy has also moved completely into just holding the front lines and attriting the Russians. If they can attrit the Russian Federation longer than the Russian Federation can last, and shorter than it will take for Ukraine to collapse, they will win. Because that's how the First World War was won, that's how the Second World War was won, and that's how this war will be won. It will be won as a war of attrition, waiting to grind down the Russian Federation, and then when the time is ripe, you will see massive offensive victories on the battlefield. But that largely will come as a side effect of the Russian collapse happening in the background. Just like the massive successes in 1918 and World War I were not because the Allied forces at that point were massively doing better than the Russians on the than the Germans on the battlefield. It was because the Germans were collapsing in the background. The Allies didn't really know that at that time, but because of the collapse going on in Imperial Germany, the Allied forces in eastern France were able to have massive successes against the Germans and actually push them back and out of France, giving another good example of when decisive victories were had in World War I, but not because of decisive actions on the battlefield, but because of economic collapse happening in the background. So that would be my best answer to the when and where will the war end, and how it will end, and what really the focus needs to be shifted to in the public mindset on how this war will be won, because it's all about endurance, and that's a big thing on this channel, is that we always try and make sure that everyone's spirits are high, because this war is going to be a long one. It's still going to last quite a while, even through this year or maybe even the next year, and it's all about making sure to keep high spirits, keep high morale, and know as long as we kind of sit this thing out, it will be won. It's just a matter of waiting out the Russians. And so with that, now to get on to the second question from Tony, and hey Tony, and also huge shout out to Relaxation Signals. Hey, welcome on in, welcome. Y'all are in here like every night. But anyways, moving on from that, we got to see that apparently, from what we know, I don't know what we got to see, like I don't even know why I said that, but from what we know, Putin's government is actually a fairly strong one. I'll be entirely honest, and it's really because Putin is a ruthless leader and purges anyone who appears to have a chance of seizing power from him. We saw that especially with Yevgeny Prigozhin last year at this exact same time of the year. Right now, as we're covering this news now, Last year, Yevgeny Prigozhin attempted to overthrow the government, failed, and then was assassinated by Putin later on. So going off of that, we have a very, very clear indicator that the Russian government is actually strong. Not because it's a well-put-together government and people like Putin, it's because Putin has an iron fist a lot like Stalin, and it's very hard to deal with an iron fist like that. However, there is a way. If the Russian economy does collapse, like we're assuming it will by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, due to the massive economic strains we're already seeing, we are assuming that that kind of economic upheaval will generally create a very fragile situation in the Russian government, even if Putin has an iron fist on its control. And so going off of that, we would believe that Putin may actually be ousted. I don't ever believe that he'd be assassinated per se, or executed more so. It probably would be a pretty modern exit. At least modern as in how a lot of leaders go these days when their countries are on the backslide. We would probably see that Putin would load up the Russian Air Force One with a whole bunch of money. He would take off from Moscow, fly to China, and he would most likely live out the rest of his life in exile in China. Or he may live out his life in exile in a place like Belarus if they're able to maintain their nuclear arsenal that's been given to them by the Russian Federation during this war. So that would be the way I believe Putin would go out at this point. I don't believe that they would drag him out of the Kremlin and execute him on the spot or anything like that anymore. I just don't think that would be possible, because throughout all of this, and I believe Matthew would agree with this, Putin's government has been fairly resilient, even in situations where we believe that it would actually be in jeopardy. It appears that it has survived somewhat okay. So going off of that, I believe that if anything happened, though, serious enough, there would actually be enough of a cushion or control time that they would be able to pack up and move Putin out to live in exile in a foreign country. In Catherine F. said
that's about the only thing that Putin has done like pretty good throughout the whole war is he's solidified himself in his position. He's also made it very hard for people to get near him, so nobody can really, knock him off to assassinate him. And also, he just solidified himself so well that there's nobody that could even come up and try to take his place. Because even Prigozhin, who tried to do that, made some fatal mistakes, and he couldn't even pull it off. So, that's the only thing he's done. He doesn't care about the people. He really can't fight a war worth of crap, but he can protect himself, that's for sure.
That is certainly true. I mean, that is the biggest thing that we're getting out of this war at this point, is that the Russian central government has such an iron grip and will purge anyone who stands in their way. Even Sergei Shoigu, who has been the Minister of Defense for 12 years, wasn't even a possible saving grace in the purge. He was removed as well, which is very shocking, to be entirely honest with you all, because Shoigu is Putin's right-hand man, and for him to be removed as well, it shows that no one is safe in that purge, and that means that that government is filled with yes-men. It would be very hard to disrupt that kind of a system and have them overthrow Putin, to be entirely honest. So, if the government started to collapse, it would most likely be a collapse caused... Let's go through a hypothetical scenario here. Russian oil runs out. Therefore, the agricultural industry collapses, because the agriculture industry around the world is heavily industrialized and requires a large amount of fuel. Without that, modern agriculture ceases to exist. That means that famines would most likely start to grip the country, or food supplies would start running out greatly. That is the biggest motivator for civil unrest. That would most likely start to create riots within the cities. We would most likely see that members of the armed forces would join that as well on a lower level, on the junior officer side, and they would most likely lead units of their own in support of these riots. We would probably see that would start to creep up the higher chain of command, as a lot of people started to see that the Russian government was becoming very fragile, and they would most likely need to jump ship. And then that's when we would see that during that time, because that's the cushion time that Putin would be able to flee to another country, he would pack up an aircraft, he would fly out, and then he would go live out his life in exile in a foreign country. He would probably never be held accountable for crimes against humanity or anything along those lines. He would probably end up just living out his life in some faraway country, like Belarus or China or Venezuela, or maybe even Cuba, although I'm highly doubtful about Cuba, because Cuba is a hellhole. Venezuela is a hellhole too, but Cuba is the worst, I believe. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the absolutely amazing support, Tony. That was huge. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel and helping keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to go into deep dive rabbit holes and analysis like that. And if y'all enjoyed that analysis, put an LSA in the chat. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to James Reyes, who puts in a $50 donation, and a huge shout out to James. for that massive support. He says very simply and very kindly, love you guys. And thank you very much, James. Likewise as well. And thank you very much for always supporting the channel and helping to keep us running, because it does mean a lot to us. And thank you very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, James, because it is absolutely incredible to know that folks like you enjoy this channel so much and support it and help it to keep on running. And we love you too. We love the entire LSA. The LSA is an absolutely amazing group. It is unbelievable. A force to be reckoned with. I don't know if y'all know this, but let me quickly show this, Matthew. I ought to show the playboard stats. Man, we're going to pull up the whole rap sheet. Let me go get it really quickly. And let me scroll down. It should, come on, pop up. There we go. Okay, so let's see here. So we had, in the top, we had Dr. Disrespect. Let's see here. We had Darman. We had Tim. You know, you're kind of normal folks. Let's see here. Let's see here. I'm trying to get down lower on the list. For some reason, it's taking a while for this list to load. Of course, Coco Melon beat us. You just can't beat Coco Melon. Let's see here. Come on. Come on. Dang it. Like, dude, this thing takes forever to load. I'm just over here hitting it. I'm trying to get down there on the list. So here we go. Wait a minute. Did this update for yesterday? Hold up. Oh, dang, Matthew, it updated for yesterday. Okay, so sadly...
What was it?
Dang, I can't show it because it was actually yesterday, the day before yesterday's stat sheet then. But we were number 73 in the world. But the thing is that just yesterday, we were actually just a few hundred viewers short of Tucky G. The Tucky G on YouTube. Like, we were close to overcoming Tucky G. Like, no joke.
But you know the difference between us and Tucky G? You know what the difference is?
What is the difference?
We make fun of Putin. We don't get punked by Putin. That's the huge difference.
Listen, man, are you a comedian or a news reporter? Both. It's like we're both. Like, we'll admit that. But with that, going off of that, I got to thank you so much for the support, James Reyes, because it is the Lee Spring Army that is a force to be reckoned with on the internet, and it's absolutely crazy. The Lee Spring Army, by number, is the largest pro-Western organization that I believe exists out there right now. It's thank you, relaxation signals. That was very nice. Like, I don't know if you saw that. That was very nice. But with that, we are the biggest pro-Western organization that I can think of in the world right now that's on YouTube. We beat out some of the largest news channels on a daily basis. I mean, we beat out Associated Press and NBC the other day when that stat came out. I don't know who we beat today because I didn't really get a good look at that graph. I clicked off of it after I saw that it was today's. But beyond that, the least...
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on real quick. Nobody knows who Tucky G is. For context, that's Tucker Carlson. I see people are like confused as hell. They're like, who the hell is Tucky G? They're like, tell us who that is. It's Tucker. It's that guy. The guy that got punked by Putin live in the Kremlin.
Yeah, it's Tucker Carlson. And usually, y'all may not believe this, but go check out the stats every once in a while on the top 100 in America. We usually are within spitting distance of Tucker Carlson, or as we call him, Tucky G, or we overdo Tucker Carlson on most days that he's live, which is absolutely hilarious, like when you think about it. Because, you know, we have to put this into perspective. Tucker Carlson runs a show that... Of course, he is from Fox News, so tens of millions of Americans know the guy. He moves off onto his own thing. He has dozens of employees that help him to make that show possible. And then even out of that, we still get close to him. And we don't have dozens of employees here at the Lee Spring Army HQ. It's literally just Matthew and me. And we still get into spitting distance of that channel, which is absolutely hilarious to me. And it's something that...
How do we pull that off?
I don't
like,
know.
How does that even happen? Like, I don't even understand.
Well, you know what's even better was that one day we beat everyone. Like, we beat Fox, CNN, ABC. You know, it was the day that we were reporting on the Iran-Israel situation, and we got 55,000 live viewers. We beat them all. Like, every single one of them that was running that night, we beat them. But beyond that, that shows how much of a force the Lee Spring Army is on the internet. It is truly a force to be reckoned with out there. And nowadays, because back in the day, what's really funny, from what we can even tell, is that adversaries of the channel, like, oh man, used to say things like, the Lee Spring Army is irrelevant, it's a stupid organization, or this channel is stupid and it's a relevant organization. And now even they are saying that it's a force to be reckoned with. And it's something nice to see, a bit of a change there, because it's truly, it is the biggest organization out there, by far, that I believe. And we beat... Like I'm just sitting here rambling at this point. I'm going to cut this a little bit short so that way you don't ramble too much. But We even beat NAFO at this point, because I do talk to NAFO members from here and there, time to time, and NAFO officially has 106,000 members. We have 223,000 members, and we're getting really close, believe it or not, already today to 224,000. We've almost gained 1,000 new members of the Lee Spring Army just today, which is really crazy to see, and it's really crazy to know that we have climbed that fast and that far over such a short period of time. But still,
very fortunate. We're very fortunate. But at the same time, I will say, like, we work on this thing nonstop, like 24/7. When I wake up in the morning, I'm immediately working on nothing but the channel all the way until the evening as well. Like 24/7, we're on top of this thing. So we're glad to see it's doing well, because the hard work is paying off. And I love working on it 24/7. It's really not even like working. It's just like doing what we like to do every single day. And that's when you know you found your niche, is when you love doing it. But we're very grateful.
We are incredibly grateful. And I got to thank you so much once again, James Reyes, for that incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the final question in this segment, and then we're going to be moving on back into the news.
All right, and up next for our last one, we have another very massive $100 donation.
Hey!
And huge shout out to Gerald Everett for putting in that $100 donation. He says, during World War II, it took the U.S. nearly 7 million artillery shells to take Okinawa alone. And how is it adequate for us to build a plant to make 30,000 shells a month?
That's a good question. A great question, actually. And it's one that requires a good amount of talking. Let's see here. Let me see here.
It's the highlighted one.
Yes, I'm looking at it. I'm having to read it because I'm sitting here trying to think, how in the world am I going to go about responding to this one, because it's a really in-depth answer, actually. So I think I have the best way I can get about this. I'm so sorry, everyone, because back in the day, we used to have very simple answers to questions, and then we would have people come in here, because the thing is, like, the real situation about answers nowadays is that answers are very simple and straightforward to get to, but a whole bunch of people would come onto this channel and dog me because I would give simple answers to very in-depth questions. And they would be right answers, but of course, you got like some fatso who sits in the basement all day and they don't enjoy life, so they got to complain about something. So then I have to come up with really in-depth answers to questions, so it becomes a lot more difficult to answer. But still, it is what it is. But to answer that question, World War II was a very special kind of a war, especially compared to a modern war, because during that time, there was no such thing as a precision-guided munition. Nowadays, almost every single artillery shell that is produced here in the West is usually of a precision variety, or we don't really produce that much. Specifically, because we are a peacetime economy and in a peacetime nation. A lot like we were before World War II, the numbers of artillery production just is not that high. And it's really difficult to try and produce a large amount of artillery without dedicating a lot of economic activity to it. So to be entirely honest about that, I'm trying to find the best way to explain this. I'm really am, because it would literally take like a book level thesis to explain. And I think I'm just going to cut it down to a simple answer, because that really would be the best way to do that. And also, by the way, some people are like, Fatso. I'm not calling y'all Fatsos. I'm calling the haters Fatsos. Like, Fatso. Yeah, you heard me say that earlier, right?
Yeah, I was wondering who you're talking about.
Nah, I'm not calling anyone in the chat a fatso. I'm calling the haters fatsos. But it's usually they are. Like, if you ever see, like, a profile picture of me, like, ew, like, jeez. But anyways, beyond that, I can't really talk, though, because, I can't even get my jaw realigned, Matthew, because I got all that padding, you know what I mean? But with that, moving on from that and into the actual whole question. In trying to get this out as simply as possible, because I will not be able to get it out in an in-depth way without making it overly complicated. Modern wars are more so precision munitions, which requires a lot less to be produced, because we would mostly be producing the M982 Excalibur rounds, which can actually be laser guided onto their target. That requires less munitions. Not only that, the United States is in a civilian economy, or more so a commercial economy or a consumer economy at the moment instead of a wartime economy, which means that a lot of our economic activity isn't really able to be focused on the military production. So going off of those two things, that's why we are not producing an excessively large amount of artillery, or we're not really planning on it, because there's not really a good way to do that at the moment with the current way the U.S. economy is geared. And not only that, the amount of precision-guided munitions needed will actually be a little bit lower. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And thank you so much once again for that unbelievably massive support, Gerald Everett, and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on out of this question segment and into the rest of the news that we have tonight. But before we do, I do have to make a quick little mention, because I'm seeing this a little bit in the chat. We do not allow mentions of other YouTube channels here in our live chat. If you like them, that's great. But we don't want people advertising other people's channels here in this live chat. It's a little rude, to be quite honest, especially to us, because we put in endless amount of hours per day to make this show, so that way people can come on here and try and piss on the work and then advertise other channels. We're not really a big fan of that, so I would generally have to encourage folks to not do that and just enjoy the channel. If y'all like another channel, that's great, but we don't really want to hear them being advertised around here. And also, a lot of people are misunderstanding something. I think maybe because Matthew interjected, I didn't get it out too well. I'm not calling any of y'all fatsos. None of y'all are fatsos. I'm calling the people. I'm calling the people who are criticizing the channel fatsos, because it is their soul that is horrendous. That's what I'm saying, y'all. Y'all misunderstood it a little bit. That's not what it meant at all. But anyways, moving on.
How come they can't be underweight like me? How come they can't be like that?
Because usually, Matthew, you know who I'm talking about. They're hot dog people. Like, you know who I'm talking about. Like, they're... Like, you know, we've seen some pictures of them, man. They are not the healthiest of people. I mean, I'm not the healthiest of people either. I'm not gonna lie. You know, like I'm not like physically fit, like and lean and everything, but I'm not like that. It's like, you know, there's a scale here, y'all, and I'm not over there, and none of y'all are over there either. But anyways, moving on from that and into the location unknowns, we did get to see a BTR-4 today on the firing range, which is pretty nice to see. Look at that thing, and it is covered in cope cage. Very nice to see. And so with that, we're now moving on from that into our next bit of location unknown news, where we also got to see a Caesar SPG, which is really nice to see. Look at that thing. It looks a lot like...
nice.
It actually looks a lot like a Caesar SPG. I mean, it looks exactly like one. But really cool to see, because, of course, these draw fire from real Caesar SPGs and make sure that the Russians don't actually destroy real SPGs that are in use. But with that, we're now moving on from that little bit of news and on into the next one, where we also got to see a little puppy that the Ukrainians have on the front lines hitching a ride, which was pretty cute. This is a very fluffy puppy. And there it is. We see them putting the puppy on top of the case. Oh, and look at that thing. And they're carrying it away with the case. Very cute puppy.
Man, that dog is spoiled out here.
Man, that dog do be spoiled. Moving on from that, and on into our last bit of location unknowns, we also got to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and good googly moogly!
My goodness!
Oh
what
my
in
God.
the world? 16 Bobcats. They took us over the 2,300 mark today. That is impressive to see. Also, these numbers are so high, this might lead us to believe why Putin is suddenly wanting a ceasefire, because this is pretty ugly looking. I'm telling you what, those Russians, they're hurting. They're hurting bigly.
And it is actually very bad today, incredibly bad. We're really in most metrics except for the tanks. The tanks are all right, but everything else is looking pretty horrendous today. 1,250 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, meaning that a battalion tactical group and a half has been wiped out in terms of combat power. Not only that, 26 armored personnel carriers have been destroyed, along with 60 supply trucks, 8 main battle tanks, 48 artillery pieces, 22 drones, 1 cruise missile, 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 16 Bobcat skid steers. Overall, it was a pretty bad day. And it's time for me to show y'all why it was a bad day with all the combat footage that we've got. And so moving on from that and up into the area around Vovchansk, we actually didn't get a lot of footage from here today, but we did get to see Ukraine, specifically through 924, talking about how US weapons are used on the Russian Federation. And so without further ado, here's the clip.
End of May. The USA allows Ukraine to strike Russian territory with the weapons they provided. So what has changed on the front since this permission? Why haven't the Allies taken another important step yet? And what do Ukrainian military say about the new conditions? On May 29th, the Washington Post published a call from Achilles, commander of Ukrainian 92nd Brigade's Drone Battalion.
My people are told to defend Ukraine, Europe and the West with one hand tied behind their back. If we were given the green light, we could easily destroy enemy electronic warfare systems, command centers and missile launch platforms. We know where they all are. We could stop the invaders.
We will return to Achilles later, but for now... After 27 months of prohibition, the Allies finally allowed strikes on enemy territory, and the Ukrainians did strike. For example, in the Belgorod region, the S-400 air defense system burned spectacularly after the HIMARS strike. And Sky News reported on the first strike on Russian territory by a Ukrainian plane. An enemy command center was hit. Analysts of Defense Express determined that these were American GMLRS missiles launched from HIMARS. These missiles carry tungsten fragments that disperse over a large area upon impact. The strike neutralized not only several S-400 launchers, but also radar equipment. Now Ukrainians plan to systematically drive Russian forces out from the border area. For this purpose, they will use European and American artillery systems and launchers, as well as air-to-ground missiles. For example, the American M777 howitzer has a range of 24 kilometers, or up to 40 kilometers with smart Excalibur munitions. The Slovak Zuzana and German Panzerhaubitze 2000 can fire at 40 kilometers, the French César at about 46 kilometers, and the Swedish Archer at 60 kilometers. However, HIMARS has a strong chance of becoming the headliner of the strike forces. With its GMLRS missiles, it can strike targets at a range of 80 kilometers. That said, the USA did not allow Ukraine to use long-range ATACMS missiles. The UK and France, however, did not directly prohibit Ukrainians from using their air-to-surface Storm Shadow or Scalp missiles. The export modifications of these missiles reach a range of 250 to 290 kilometers. Another innovation is currently being tested in the war in Ukraine. Ground-launched small-diameter bombs, or GLSDBs, proved ineffective as they were downed by Russian jammers. Instead, the less-known small-diameter glide bomb, GBU-39, showed incredible effectiveness. Almost 90% of the dropped bombs hit their target. GBU-39 was also adapted for ground use in HIMARS launchers, a development that Pentagon representatives say will increase the range of rocket artillery. But why do Ukrainians need to strike Russian territory at all? It is actually necessary not just to destroy the enemy. In May, Russia launched a new large-scale offensive on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, located just a few dozen kilometers from the border. Moreover, preparations for the attack were carried out right before the eyes of Ukrainians. Rob Lee, a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute's Eurasia program, explained to Reuters.
Russia could keep its artillery right across the border. It could keep air defense, electronic warfare, command and control there. It had maybe a degree of kind of sanctuary.
Ukrainians saw all this, but their hands were tied. Old Soviet weapons did not reach there, and Western ones were prohibited to use. What did this lead to? Russia occupied another 200 square kilometers again. Several villages were destroyed by glide bombs and artillery. The almost 20,000-strong town of Vovchansk became a battlefield and practically ceased to exist. Now the situation may change. The Russian offensive is already stalled. Most of Ukraine's allies have given permission to freely use their weapons. Russia constantly threatens everyone with words. But how did they actually respond? With a deepfake, for instance. The US State Department spokesman Matthew Miller allegedly proposed to target the Russian border town of Belgorod. It is not the first time Russia loudly warns about something and does nothing. Same thing happened with the tank coalition, ATACMS and F-16s. Provision of all these weapons was caused by the intensification of Russian attacks on the battlefield, and all this helped to level this situation at least a little. However, all this time the West has only been reacting, not anticipating events. But here's what Ukraine could actually achieve if it no longer had to fight with one hand behind its back. Crimea is a Ukrainian peninsula that Russia has occupied since 2014. It is Putin's pride. It hosts multiple Russian military bases, airfields, and a naval fleet. But now all of this is under threat. Almost half of the once formidable Russian Black Sea Fleet is already at the sea bottom. On April 17th, after an ATACMS strike on the Jankoy Air Base, helicopters, an S-400 battery, and a command post were damaged. On May 15th and 16th, after similar strikes, the Belbek Air Base was on fire, where 4 planes were destroyed, as well as the so-called Russian Patriot, the S-400 air defense system. Military targets in Crimea are attacked by Ukraine with a deadly combination of its own naval and air drones, as well as long-range missiles. However, the USA did not allow firing ATACMS in the north of Ukraine. What does the White House have to say about it? The USA has not ruled out the possibility of expanding its permissions in the future. However, this might again be done in response to another Russian escalation. Meanwhile, thanks to the new permission, Ukrainians are making another move in response. Do you remember the heartfelt cry of the Ukrainian officer Achilles? It seems that something has changed now.
The ground under the occupiers' feet is starting to burn. The equipment, artillery, S-300 and S-400 systems, electronic warfare means. All this is starting to ignite. We have already inflicted heavy strikes in certain sectors. As a result, Kharkiv has not been shelled for—
Oh no, he can't hear us, Matthew, because he got in them AirPods. Get out of the way!
I just said the same thing in the chat. I was about to say, he's too rich. He can't hear you. He's got those AirPods Pros.
Dude, the virgin Russian soldier using his normal earpods while the Chad Ukrainian uses the Apple the Apple AirPods. But man, I'm telling you, they've won the war, man. Like these little things that really let you know the big difference in between the Russians and the Ukrainians. You know what I mean?
I'm telling you, you don't see the Russians with AirPods. They barely have a potato.
Dude, they so Paul. They have those little Sony things, you know, the cassette players, man, that with the little headphones. That's what the Russians have. This guy got the whole AirPod though.
Also, real quick, I was gonna say that typically when I hear like these videos of like bashing the United States a little bit for not giving enough support or something like that, typically I'm like, that's probably not smart to say that about the hand that feeds you. But on this one, I will say that United 24 does have a point about the U.S. holding back Ukraine a little bit, because it was until just recently that the U.S. gave permission to strike into Belgorod with some of the munitions, the long-range ATACMS, and they've only expanded it only to Belgorod, to my understanding. Have they expanded it any further than that? Whoa!
Look, Jack, I have to tell you, when I went on vacation, I greased the fool, but no, like they haven't extended it any further in reality, because the thing is that the U.S. wants to keep them very contained with what they're striking. So from what we know, they're not able to use the ATACMS anywhere in Russia. And if they want to use American weapons, the farthest range one that they would be able to use currently would be the GMLRS from the HIMARS, and those can only go 50 miles into Russia, in the Belgorod Oblast only. Actually, no. I believe they extended that to the entire border region, if they can strike, but it is only the GMLRS, which is the longest range item. The ATACMS are excluded.
Yeah, it's in my opinion, while I still stutter, I don't know what's got me stuttering so
dude,
bad.
We're both stuttering, dude, like clowns. We're both going, go ahead.
Yeah, but if we give Ukraine the weapons they need to strike Russia, and we tell them you can strike Belgorod, in my opinion, we should let them strike anywhere they want with those weapons. If we're giving Ukraine weapons, we shouldn't give them with strings attached to it. I know why the United States is doing that. They're doing that because they're worried that Ukraine is not going to exercise due diligence or restraint, and they might attack a target like the Kremlin, and that could start a really bad situation. But my thing is this: Ukraine is going to end up bringing their own consequences on themselves if they do something goofy like that. Because if they go and attack a target like the Kremlin, and the Russians end up firing weapons at the capital of Ukraine, then it is what it is. It's just going to happen, and Ukraine will have to suffer the consequences of it. Because the U.S. is worried that it's going to get really out of control. Like, for example, Russia's going to start firing nukes at everybody. But in my opinion, Ukraine should have the best common judgment on that and not strike those targets. So we should just let them have the weapons, use them the way they want, and let that be the end of it.
I would agree with that completely. And with that, we're going to get back to literally like the last 20 seconds of the video, and then we're going to move on into our next bits of news.
For almost a week. It is important that in the near future our allies allow us to use long-range weapons exclusively against military targets. We must strike the enemy in its lair and fight the root of the problem, not its consequences.
And that's the end of that clip. But still, really interesting to know what the Ukrainians are saying about U.S. weapons and their usage in Russia. But moving on from that and down the line and into the area around the Kremenna Forest, we did get to see the Storm unit using their drones to hit Russian vehicles, which we can see right here. That appears to be some kind of an attempt at a shed or a house, as we call it on this channel. And we can see the vehicle throwing out a whole bunch of black smoke. Ooh, and hit dead on the nail by an FPV drone. It appears that the vehicle is now smoking. Oh, you can see crew hopping out. Dude, they're making a run for it, man. Dude, oh my, where did they all come from? I didn't even see them hop out, man. Like, there they go, and the vehicle's on fire.
They thought about chasing it for a second, but then they're like, forget it. It's a loss.
Dude, they already knew it was going to be an insurance write-off, man. So they just started running. And we can see the clusters are now hitting them. And that's the end of that clip, but really nice to see. Once again, huge shout out to Pigeon Forge. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a Russian Lancet attempted to hit a Ukrainian Buk surface-to-air missile defense system today and missed. And for some reason, they published the footage. I don't know why, but it was a complete miss. So there's the Buk. And any second now, the Lancet's going to start hitting the Buk. And we can see the cameras getting closer and closer, and here comes the Lancet any minute now. You know, missed by like 30 yards. Like, how? Like, look, the Buk wasn't even moving really by this point. Look at it, man. It's like going 3 miles an hour, and they miss it by 30 freaking yards. Like, how do you do that? I don't even know.
Terrible. Terrible aim.
Terrible losses. Oh, but one Ukrainian did go running, though. He was like, oh, shit. Like, so he picked up and started running. But everyone was fine, and the Buk did survive. So that was pretty lucky for them. But moving on from that and on to our next clip near Ivanivsky, we also got to see a turtle tank that got knocked out. This is, once again, your normal kind of a toidle tank that has been destroyed near the area. Of course, with the normal sheet metal and all that stuff attached, we can also see the turret sticking out underneath. But, of course, it has been completely knocked out. We can also see an electronic warfare jammer on top of it, but it appears to have not really worked too well, at least in this one situation.
Looks like a Fallout 4 tank with the way they've like added like the modification on top of it, the EW system, and also put those like sheet metal pieces all over it. It looks literally like straight out of Fallout 4.
You know what this looks like, dude? This looks like a small little cage that they put dumbbells into and then electrified it. That doesn't even look like an EW jammer. That just looks like garbage that they put up there.
Yeah, and why is it green? Like, is it really green, or am I misseeing that?
You're not colorblind, Matthew. That is green.
Oh, it's green. That's a weird color for camo. Like a lime green, that is. Not green in general, but a lime green.
What do you mean green is a weird color for camo?
That green is weird for it. Not all greens, but just that one.
Green. Green is a weird color for camo.
Yeah, I know. When I said that, I was like, well, not forest green, not dark green, but lime green. That's a terrible one.
Battle tactics with Enforcer Matt. Wear red instead. It looks better. But anyways, I'm just kidding with you. Moving on down into the area of Novobakhmut, we got to see that an open-air mine depot got blown up. And Matthew, look at that. That juicy right there. My goodness.
Man.
Oh, and they got that chic army boy music playing right here. And we can see the drone coming in. And oh my god, dude, look at the shockwave. Look at that. You can actually see the shockwave travel across the ground. Oh my lord. That is crazy. Those anti-tank mines, man, they've got some potency to them. I mean, they got some kick. But with that's the end of that clip right there. But man, the 3rd Brigade be roasting these folks out here. But moving on from that and down to the area of Sokol, we also got to see an M1A1 Abrams with all of the fine trimmings that the Ukrainians have added to it. I'm not going to lie, kind of dissing a little bit. I don't really like the armor mods that have been put onto the Abrams. I kind of like the Abrams, like, natural, you know what I mean? Like, it looks a lot better that way. But it works, I suppose. It's just that I'm not a big fan. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't look that good. At least to me. I think the Abrams looked a lot better in its natural state. But, you know, anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on from that little bit of information and talking. But anyways, we got something else. Putin says he's forced to move the front line toward Kharkiv to reduce attacks on Belgorod. Now, that's actually a change, because originally he said that this was a sanitary zone. Now he's saying that they have to move towards Kharkiv, really just cuz. So what are a lot of people thinking about that, Andy? What are folks thinking about that statement? Do they think that's stupid? Do they think that's ludicrous? Do they think he can even do it? And what do you think about it?
So about 40% of the audience said Putin can't even move on Kharkiv. He doesn't even have the ability, while 33% said Putin will double down on Kharkiv and actually go for it once again, while 19% said Putin is simply trying to bluff Ukraine. And on this one, honestly, I'm not really sure what to think, because Putin has obviously failed his offensive toward Kharkiv, and the Russian troops are getting absolutely hammered in Vovchansk, and they're getting run out. And even Putin himself has admitted it's not going that great. But now he's saying he wants to move the front line closer to the city of Kharkiv yet again, which makes no sense whatsoever because he just literally lost. So unless he's planning on regrouping, putting a whole new group of people in there, soldiers, to try to siege the city once again and fail once again, which they're not going to get through, I'm not sure really what he's doing. So I would assume maybe he's trying to bluff, but I really don't know. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say this is 100% a bluff. The Vovchansk offensive attempted to do that, and it's already failed, and the Ukrainians are counterattacking at the moment. And while the Ukrainians aren't really making that much progress in the counterattack, the fact that they're counterattacking has shown that the offensive has completely lost all of its energy. So I would say that advancing on Kharkiv is nothing more than hype talk at this point, because they already tried and they already failed in the past. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Ukrainian 3rd Brigade around Avdiivka today took 24 Russian prisoners on film. Here's the footage. We're going to be muting the Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon playing in the background or whatever that is. But we can see the Russians being brought out of the dugouts and being taken prisoner. We can see another couple of them right here, and that's the end of the clip. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of footage and on into our next bit, a little bit further down the Donetsk Oblast, where we got to see that some massive explosion happened right outside the city of Donetsk. Here's the clip.
Yeah.
Dude, he sped up, dude. You could hear that engine after that explosion, dude. He said, and then the engine went. It's like, dang, dude, he's getting it.
He's pushing the Lada a little too hard. It's going to blow a gasket.
Captain, I'm giving her all she's got. I can't give her much more. Dude, that's what that Lada's saying.
Scotty, you've got to have more, Scotty. You've got to have more.
Dude, that Lada ain't giving more. He'd be like, nah, it explodes on the road. But anyways, moving on from that and down into the area of Staromayorsk, we did see that the Russians are attempting an offensive in this area today, and it looks like they're not doing well. Here is some of the aftermath of today's assault on Staromayorsk. We can see a destroyed T-72B. We can also see a destroyed BMP-2. We can then also see a destroyed MTLB with a whole bunch of nice little goodies right out of the back door, Matthew. I call those Louisiana oyster eggs right there, because they are going to make you explode just like Taco Bell would. I mean, that right there is dangerous, what's behind that MTLB. I would keep away from that, me personally. But we also got to see a destroyed BMP-1 near to a couple of Dragon's Teeth, which is kind of cool. I didn't even know there were any out there. And then we also got to see another destroyed T-72B and another knocked out BMP-2. We then also saw 2 destroyed BMPs. One appears to be a BMP-1 and the other was a BMP-2. The turret of this APC is actually right here behind the BMP-2. But both of them were completely knocked out. We also got to see another destroyed main battle tank that appears to be some sort of a T-72 possibly, because you can actually see the diesel engine sticking out right there. T-80s have a gas turbine, so completely different power plant, but that looks to be a T-72. Then we also got to see what might actually be a T-80. Yeah, that's a T-80 because the engine bay lines up, but that is a T-80BV with a whole load of anti-tank mines around it again, just sitting there in the field, knocked out. Then in the next picture, we got to see BMP-2, a really interesting modified BMP-2 that actually tried to drive onto a Ukrainian trench. We could see it right there, and it appears to have been blown up in the attempt, so didn't look like it ended well for them. We can also see here a destroyed BMD-2. Actually, that's incredibly rare, and a destroyed BMP-2 right down here at the bottom of the screen with the turret flipped right up right there. And also, we can see a couple of guys taking some good little naps in that picture. But moving on from that, we also got to see a little bit of video footage of the failed attack today as well. Also, you got to see like literally one frame of the aftermath at the beginning right there. But here's the clip. There's our tank at Staromayorsk. The drone's about to come in and finish it off in a second. And there we go. And it's gone. That thing is done for. Very nice. I like it, me personally. I don't know about y'all. But moving on from that and out of the area of Staromayorsk, we were also able to see that down in the Kherson area, the Magyar's Birds was able to take down another Russian recon drone. Here's the clip.
Сьогоднішнє. Проте як оператори ЛЛС птахів Мадяра та окремого батальйону РЕБ морської піхоти зведеною групою вираховують ворожі орлани. А пілоти екіпажу Степан першого бату 35-ї бригади морської піхоти вирубають того небезпечного розвідника.
And swiping down at it and getting it. Very nice to see. And good to know that they're still taking down the recon drones in the area. But with that, it is now time for us to move on to a little bit of news down the Kursk Bridge, because we actually got to see some video taken today from the bridge that was removed, and so we will not be seeing that. I don't know why y'all ever thought that. Absolutely heretical. Heresy, I'd say. But moving on from that into Hungary, we did get to hear that apparently NATO is moving Hungary out of the information and intelligence loop in NATO, according to apparently the position of the country's authorities in relation to NATO. So that appears to be letting us get an idea that apparently NATO is not a big fan of the Hungarian leadership at the moment, and multiple countries in NATO are no longer sharing information with them. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least that little news segment. And what do y'all think about it? Do y'all think that that's a right thing to do to a NATO ally or not? But moving on from that, we also got an air defense report from inside of Kyiv showing that things are going quite well. 7 KH-101 cruise missiles were destroyed, along with 17 Shahed-136 drones. It appears that the capital air defense system did fairly well. And with that, it is now time for us to move on to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on day 842 of the war. Are you kidding me? He didn't put one out. Like, hang on.
No, he's got to have a speech. He has to.
He's got to. I got to have that restroom break. We're going to have to find one. Listen, man, that's what they're for. You know that. Let's see here.
I'd like to hear Zelensky speak. Could you please tell us some more about what's happening on the front line?
What the hell is up with this unreliability these days? You used to put them out daily. Now you're like putting them out every other week. What the hell is up with this?
You know what, folks? How would y'all like to watch a little statement that was made of the day? So let me see here if I can get y'all this really quickly. Why not?
Hello there, that's a nice somebody from 1950 coming in to tell us about the war.
Yeah, yeah, why not? But anyways, I'm going to move y'all over here really quickly to this little video. It has a translator on it. Some people find that distracting. Sorry, this is the best I can do. But here is one of the most recent addresses from President Zelensky on day 841 of the war, but we're going to count it for day 842. So considering that we didn't see this one the other day. Also, let me make sure to turn on the subtitles and get them English-generated subtitles right here. And without further ado, here's the speech from President Zelensky.
Від початку нашої незалежності.
What the hell is that? Dude, that was a phone call.
Coming from the 1950s.
I would like to thank you all so much for being here. It's of course great to run the NATO alliance and to give all this money, and I would like to ask for more.
But anyways, here's the speech.
І це угода про безпеку і тому про захист людського життя. Це угода про співпрацю. А отже, про те, як наші держави стануть міцнішими. Це угода про кроки, щоб гарантувати сталий мир. І тому вона приносить користь всім у світі. Тому що російська війна проти України – це справді глобальна загроза. Я дякую вам дуже, пане президенте, за ваше лідерство, яке відображено, зокрема, у цій угоді і у роках вашої підтримки України. Я дякую нашим командам, обом командам, дуже дякую вам за те, що ви запевнилися в тому, що деталі цієї угоди справді якісні. І, звісно, я хочу подякувати кожному українському солдату, всім нашим людям, чия сміливість уможливили такий рівень союзництва між Україною та Сполученими Штатами. І я пишаюся нашими людьми і тим, що Україна може зробити. І я дуже вдячний всім американцям, кожному в Америці, хто посилює американське лідерство. Отже, відповідно до положень угоди, по-перше, угода містить дуже детальну юридично зобов'язальну частину. І це означає певність американської підтримки для нашої української незалежності. По-друге, безпекові зобов'язання Сполучених Штатів спираються, з-поміж іншого, на сталість безпекової та оборонної підтримки не лише на час цієї війни, але також на період миру після війни. І ми, безперечно, забезпечимо мир. По-третє, вона чітко постулює, що американська підтримка українських зусиль спрямована на перемогу України у війні. Четверте, угода також має гарні положення щодо озброєння для нашої оборони. Дуже конкретно по системах Петріот, дуже конкретно по постачанні бойових ескадрилей Україні. І це, я не помилився, в множині ескадрили, які включають, але не обмежуються F-16. Ми працювали довгий час задля цього. Угода також дуже конкретна щодо поставок необхідного озброєння, спільного виробництва та посилення оборонної промисловості наших держав шляхом нашої співпраці. Це щось, що не лише надаватиме безпеку, але також і нові робочі місця для українців та американців. Угода також окреслює, що є необхідним у вимірі розвідувальної інформації. Угода містить ключові аспекти захисту життів наших людей. По-п'яте, дуже важливо, що угода також торкається питання справедливої відповідальності Росії за цю війну та її намагань знищити українців. Америка підтримує як справедливу компенсацію за збитки, спричинені російськими ударами, так і напрацювання шляхів забезпечити, щоб заморожені російські активи використовувалися, щоб захистити та відбудувати Україну. Угода також включає санкції та експортний контроль, які змусять росіян відчути біль за те, що вони роблять проти свободи людей. І ще дві речі. Я вдячний, що філософія нашої безпекової угоди є насправді філософією Альянсу. І ось чому питання НАТО зазначається у тексті угоди. Воно постулює, що Америка підтримує українське майбутнє членство у НАТО та визнає, що наша безпекова угода є мостом до українського членства в НАТО. Дуже важливо для всіх українців та всіх європейців знати, що в Європі не буде безпекового дефіциту, який спокушатиме агресора до війни і зробить майбутнє непевним. Тепер ми чітко визначаємо все. Ми будемо співпрацювати заради перемоги. Зробимо гарантії миру ефективними та надамо необхідну безпеку для наших людей. І дякую вам, пане президенте, за ваше лідерство у рішенні G7 щодо позики у 50 мільярдів для України. Це життєво важливий крок вперед у наданні сталої підтримки Україні для перемоги у цій війні. Знерухомлені російські активи повинні бути використані для захисту життів українців від російського терору та для компенсації за збитки, які спричинив агресор Україні. Це справедливо і, безперечно, правильно. Пане президенте, я дякую вам, вашій команді. Я також хочу подякувати Конгресу Сполучених Штатів Америки за їхню підтримку. Обом партіям, обом палатам. Дякую вам. І дякую кожному американському серцю, яке не зраджує свободі та підтримує нас. Слава Україні!
And the rum slava. And with that, where's Matthew? Matthew? Hello? Where's Matt? Where is Enforcer Matt? He's not here. He's not even on the call. Where did he go? Hello? 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 Where are you? Where are you, Matthew? You must speak to us.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, he's there! Oh, hello there!
Man, why is it doing that recently? Like, out of the blue, I'll unmute my mic, and my, like, green box won't even pop up when I'm talking. It was totally unmuted and everything. I was yapping for, like, a solid, like, 30 seconds. I was like, what the hell is you yapping about? Somebody can't hear me.
I was wondering where you were. I mean, it was so scary. I was alone. I said, Horom Slava, and there was none back. I got very scared.
Man, I was freaking out. I felt like the guy on Interstellar when he was yelling at that girl from the other side of the bookcase. Hey, you hear me?
no, he was going, no, you know, all that stuff. Dude, honestly, man, I felt like I was talking to a wall, though, you know, like, no lie. But
man, you weren't talking to a wall. You were talking to a void.
Man, I really was. I was like, well, yeah, that's a better description because it makes it sound like you're stubborn if I say a wall. But still, like that was actually pretty wild right there. But still, with that, I mean, while that was wild and while that really ruffled us, like you know, because we have like the reactionary like abilities of like one of those parakeets when you take like the blanket off their head and they're like you know, like that's us whenever anything goes wrong technically. But anyways, Vendor Marcia said, "LOL, Andrew is scared of being alone." Yeah. Don't leave me.
Oh, oh no.
Oh no. What would happen if I was alone? Oh God. But anyways, I'm just kidding. No, it's just that whenever Matthew's not talking when I know he's supposed to be talking, it is time for great concern. It is time for panic. But with that, I hope we addressed that well, at least that whole side note. But it's now time for us to move on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all. It is an incredibly fun segment, because we get to do whatever we want, whatever y'all want. We get to do hood reviews, and hopefully we got some delicious hoods to look at tonight. Also, we can do anything else. I mean, like, I know that I always bring up hood reviews, and that's kind of because we were wanting one lately, because hood reviews are always hilarious. But, you know, we can do anything else y'all want. We can talk about rabbit holes, we can talk about history, we can talk about food, we can talk about things. As long as it's not political, we can talk about it. And so it's going to be incredibly fun, because y'all all have all kinds of stuff y'all want to talk about, ask about, listen about. And so, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can by our segue on into this segment. But Matthew, take it on away, because I understand that we asked that audience one last question, and a lot of them knew that they had an opinion on that. So what we got, Matthew?
So a lot of people have an opinion on the last question. And with that, we're entering our final question segment of the night, and we have one more poll to address. And this one says, should Ukraine consider any peace deal with Russia that prevents NATO membership? It looks like 74%, the overwhelming majority, said no, because NATO membership is the only way to guarantee Ukraine's security, while 11% said they can consider it because US gave a security guarantee for Ukraine, and 10% said it really depends on what's in the deal itself. And on this one, this is a tricky one, because NATO membership is probably more along the lines of being more reliable, to be honest, than a US security guarantee. I'm not going to get into politics here, but a U.S. security guarantee is putting all your eggs in one basket, like we said a few nights ago, and the U.S. could flake out. That is a possibility. So with NATO membership, it gets put up to a vote if someone invotes Article 5, that is, and all the members have to vote on it, and that's probably a little bit more safe for Ukraine's security. So to me, I think NATO membership is probably the only way that Ukraine is ever going to get a lot of security and also more of a guarantee of their security. So I'm with the 74%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say all that's right. But another thing is that we're not putting billions, tens of billions of dollars into Ukraine to get nothing out of this in the end. They got to join NATO and the EU by the end of this. That's a part of the deal. So no peace deal will be accepted or agreed where Ukraine cannot join NATO. Otherwise, what's all the money going to them for? For nothing? Like if they're not joining NATO, they may as well have just joined the Russian side as far as we're concerned. So that would be my honest take. At the end of this war, they have to be in NATO. Because we have to remember, at the end of the day, and everyone has to remember on this channel, at the end of the day, while we are pro-Ukrainian, I'm more so pro-Western. And so I'm looking out for Western interests and specifically American interests when we talk about this conflict. And if we're not able to get any kind of economic or military and strategic benefits out of this war and giving all of the support to Ukraine, then it's very hard to justify why we're giving it. So there has to actually be an end goal that benefits us in particular, the Western world and the United States as a whole. So going off of that, they have to end up winning, and they have to end up being able to join NATO. So any peace agreement that requires them to never join NATO will never work. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, let's see, Bilge's Myth said, sorry, U.S. guarantee isn't worth crap. Ask Native Americans. I don't think we gave them any guarantees.
Nope.
I don't think we did. You see, that was the whole thing with them, is that we never gave them a security guarantee. Now, we did give them pretty much the entire state of Oklahoma as a reservation, and then also a whole bunch of other reservations throughout the United States, but we never really had a peace guarantee with them, see? Usually it was other countries that did, and that's why we ended up attacking some of them, is because they'd have peace guarantees with other countries, like Britain. Like, specifically with the Iroquois Confederacy of the Northeastern Territory, they had an alliance with the British, so at the end of the Revolutionary War, we were actually on hostile terms with them and on the outset, because they were an ally of the United Kingdom during the Revolutionary War, so we immediately went to dismantling and destroying the Iroquois Confederacy as quickly as we could. That's how that worked back in the day. And that's how it really worked for the rest of history, is that it was a tit for tat. We would do something to the Native Americans. The Native Americans would do something to us, and then we'd do something to them because they did something to us, and vice versa, and so on, until we get into the modern day. So that wasn't really a security guarantee. We never actually had a security guarantee. There's not really an argument to be had there for that. And also, let's see, Paramecium said, we signed a lot of treaties with the Native Americans. Yeah, now that is true, but they weren't really security guarantees. It was more so contractual agreements that usually were broken by the Native Americans, actually. Because here in Alabama, there's actually a very interesting story that many people may or may not know, and this is just a particular story to Alabama, so this isn't representative of every single situation, but it will give kind of a footing to show that the history is a little bit more of a gray area than you would expect. In Alabama, there was this thing that was built called the Federal Road, and the Federal Road existed specifically for U.S. federal troops to be able to move from the settled areas of Georgia through Alabama and into New Orleans, particularly to the city of New Orleans. And so this road was built through Creek land, and by doing that, the United States and the Creeks both came to a treaty that was agreed upon that the Federal Road would be built. There would be a little area around the Federal Road that settlers would be allowed to use to set up inns, things like that, to allow the road to function, and that would be it. And everyone agreed on that. And so the road existed from about 1806 to, I believe it was 1809. It wasn't that long. It was over the course of 3 years. And there was this one specific fort down in one area that had been built along the road, which was called Fort Mims, which is right here. This is the fort, and you can actually see a couple of pictures of it. This thing is actually very famous, and I'll get to it in a second. It's actually on the placard in the picture below it. And let me see if I can get you all the actual ramparts of the fort. So this is like a reenactor thing, but you can see the ramparts of the fort and everything. Anyways, this was a fort along the Federal Road. And so 3 years later, the Creek Nation had had enough of the Federal Road and kind of decided to unilaterally break the agreement that they made with the U.S. federal government. And so a group of Native Americans came up to this fort one day. The gate was wide open because the settlers believed that they were on good terms with the Creek Nation nearby and the Creek tribes, and believed that they would be able to, just have very friendly relations with them because they didn't think that anything was awry. However, the Creeks showed up this day, and I believe, let me make sure that this is a specific day, August 30th of 1813, the Creek Nation showed up and killed all 500 civilians inside of this fort. I believe only 3 of them survived, and when they ran away and told the story of what happened at Mims, it was known as a complete massacre. And to put this into perspective, the Hamas massacre on October, I believe it was 7th of last year, was about twice the size, about 3, maybe twice or 3 times the size of this massacre that occurred right here in 1813. And this is what caused what is called the Creek Indian Wars inside of Alabama from 1813 to 1815, which were won decisively by the United States Federal Army, and General Jackson accepted Weatherford's surrender at Fort Jackson in Wetumpka, Alabama, which you can actually find if you come to Alabama and you look around a little bit. But nevertheless, there is a little bit, because Native American and Native American and federal government relations, or even Native American and state government relations, depending on what part of history you're talking about, is a very big gray area because, of course, there's always been a two-dimensional thing where either people say, oh, it was all historically, a lot of people said, oh, it was always the Native Americans' fault because they were savages and attacking the U.S. government. And then nowadays, it's the opposite. People say, oh, it was all the U.S. government's fault because they were wrongfully dealing with the Native Americans who were just peaceful people and doing nothing. It really is a mix of the two. Much like we were talking about with the Israel situation yesterday, it is kind of a mix of sometimes, because it always didn't go like this. This is one of the examples where the Native Americans started the conflict and then the United States ended it decisively. But there are other times where the United States government would get into contractual agreements with the Indians and then unilaterally decide to break them. And then that's what would end up causing a conflict. So it was really a tit for tat or a half and half kind of a thing. It's really a big gray area. It's an unfortunate story in American history, but if you really look at it from a historical lens, there isn't really one side that was to blame more so than the other. It was really just a natural butting of heads that would happen. And of course, the United States, as we know, ended up winning in the end. But it's just a part of the American story. But still, covering that was one thing I was wanting to say. We didn't really have security guarantees, and it wasn't really a one-way story. It's a lot more of a gray area and a lot more complex than you would think it would be once you get beyond the surface and you actually look at the history that was involved in United States-Indian relations. And also, a lot of people are going to be saying they're not Indians, they're Native Americans. I would agree, but the United States federal government has and I'll actually Google this for y'all so that way y'all can see this, so that way y'all know I'm not capping on this. The Board of Indian Affairs. Not now. This is, actually, here's the website. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is the U.S. government department that actually deals with Native Americans. So by legal definition, I believe that the U.S. government still calls them Indians instead of Native Americans. And let's see here. What are they? So
click on tribal membership real quick. Like you see that first tab when you get done reading that. Click on that and then we see something real quick.
Let's see, tribal membership. Let's take a look.
Do they make you pay? I'm just curious.
I'm wondering. That's actually interesting. Is determined by a set of individual tribes, not by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Therefore, uniform. Let's see. Identify which tribe your ancestor was a member of or affiliated with. You will work with that tribal government to apply for tribal enrollment. So it doesn't look like you have to pay, at least right now. And they actually help you trace your ancestry as well. So if you are a American Indian, as they call them on the website, you can actually trace it and then apply with an Indian nation that would be a part of your ancestry to become an actual American Indian. So that it doesn't look like you have to pay for any of this, but that is still pretty interesting. And also, once again, I want to make sure that we put this out there. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is the U.S. government office that specifically deals with what many of y'all would call Native Americans. But they call them on the website American Indians. So you could shorten that down to Indians, or you could call them American Indians, but it appears that the legal name for Native Americans would be Indians or American Indians. So with that, I hope that does address that well. It's a really interesting thing because a lot of people don't even know that this bureau exists in the U.S. government, but it actually is a really interesting one. And I've actually dealt with them before in the past, working in the Alabama Department of Archives, because I actually did that for a little bit as a gift store clerk. But for some reason, I actually got to talk to some people who were a part of the Bureau of Indian Affairs doing that. So I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Also cover a little bit of that just as a side note, rabbit hole sort of thing. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so we're now hopping into our super chat segment once again because we're fresh out of polls. So our first super chat is going to go to Destiny Edgerton, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Destiny, for that support. And she said, does the U.S. have underground tunnels and cities? Yes. I know D.C. does. Like, D.C. definitely has it underneath the Capitol.
Yes, we actually have underground tunnels and cities. There's actually a place in Atlanta called Underground Atlanta, and of course, these underground tunnels and cities are not as big as the actual terranean cities are on the surface. Subterranean cities are by far a lot smaller, but they do exist usually within other major cities. Let me see if I can pull up Underground Atlanta and show y'all that. Underground Atlanta. So let's see. So it's in the 5 Points district of Atlanta. We have a 5 Points in Birmingham. If you go down there, you'll probably get stabbed. But let's see if I can find y'all pictures of what down.
I've never actually seen Underground Atlanta. I've seen Above Ground Atlanta, and it's kind of scary. So I wonder if Underground's better.
So let's see here. Here is a part of Underground Atlanta called Lower Alabama. No joke. And that's what it looks like.
LA.
Yeah, it's Lower Alabama. It's LA, baby. But beyond that, that's what underground Atlanta looks like. It's not really like underground, but it's kind of technically underground a little bit. But still, that is pretty interesting to look at. You know, to think that there's just this giant place that is pretty much about, I think, like 10 feet underground or so. It's really just the basements of buildings that all interlink together, and so it became a huge thing. But anyways, moving on from all of that side note and all that just hubbub, it is kind of cool. But then also in Washington, D.C., there was a massive amount of tunnel networks that were built, I believe, specifically in the 1930s by the FDR administration to be able to transport the president to and from the Capitol, other members of the Capitol to the White House, to the Supreme Court building, all of that stuff. It's been partially open to the public. I believe that you can actually ride a small stint of it from the state Capitol building to the Supreme Court building, if I'm correct, or the Library of Congress. Because I remember, Mandy, I think we went into the station and it was open to the public, at least to the Library of Congress and the Supreme Court. So if you wanted to ride it, you could. But I don't think it.
I think it was open to interns, staff, and people like that. I don't really think it was open to the public, if I recall, because I do know that most of it, maybe there is an exception for the one to the Library of Congress, but most of it was closed to staff, and they would not let you down there. But I know there is a tram under there.
Yeah, there is a tram under there, and I believe it goes all the way to the White House, and I think a couple of other government buildings as well in the area. I'm not really sure the exact routes of that underground tram that they have in Washington, but they do have underground tunnels, and I believe they do have some subterranean type city structures in Washington, D.C., like underground Atlanta, but I don't think they're as large. I think underground Atlanta is one of the biggest ones in the country. But the short answer to that question, Destiny Edgington, would be yes. But I want to quickly dispel this really quickly, because there are some people out there, I've heard this before, and this is a pretty far-fetched one, who say that there are entire underground cities of like mole people, who like live underground and they have entire cities underground. Now, that is kind of a cool idea, but it's pretty fanciful. There is no such thing, from what I can tell. The closest that gets is the mole people of Las Vegas who live in the sewers. Like that's the best that you can get. And also, we probably have a specific group of people watching who have been to Las Vegas a couple of times. Whenever y'all are walking above ground, there are a whole bunch of homeless people under your feet in the sewers below ground, like no joke. And a lot of them actually get killed every time there's a flood, because the sewers will fill up immediately with water and they'll just drown down there. But beyond that,
why the hell they go set up a home literally in the sewer pipe where it's going to flood? Why would they do that?
Well, usually it doesn't rain, for one, so they usually don't have to worry about dying. And two, it's really the only place to get shade or any kind of shelter from, the desert that they live in. So they usually go into the sewers. But it's a little bit of an interesting thing, kind of a little bizarre, but that's probably the best, like, subterranean city of mole people kind of a thing that we have in America. It's the closest that it gets. Beyond that, it's really just things like underground Atlanta and stuff like that. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. I say Destiny, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running day in and day out. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Howard Turgell. He puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, Howard, for the support. He said, any new North or South Korea news?
Not really. It's kind of died down a little bit. It's just back to their diplomatic tit for tat that they do. I was about to say tit for tit. That's not the right thing. It's tit for tat. But they're back to their...
that?
I don't know. I have no clue, but that's the saying, man. We're running with it. But it's back to their normal tit for tat kind of a deal that they're doing. Not really seeing a lot coming out of it at the moment. It's really just the normal high drama of the Korean Peninsula, to be entirely honest. So not that much.
They're still blasting that loudspeakers, though. They got that pop music going like full blast toward the North Koreans.
Man,
I think the North Koreans haven't sent any more sewer balloons back over.
I don't think they have, Matthew, but I've heard, Matthew, they actually have something else different on those loudspeakers.
Well, they got.
Hello, Korea. You know what I mean?
Oh. Hello, Korea. I'm over here.
No. Oh, that was funny. That was a really funny clip, though. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, Howard. It's a fairly short answer, but it's just kind of, normal drama over there. Not really much to talk about. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And I thank you greatly for being here with us tonight and supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Maud Day, who puts in at 25 as well. Huge shout out to Maud for that support. And it said, Herom Slava, and I'll say Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukraini and Rom Slava. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you, Maud Day, for enjoying this channel and finding it worthwhile to support, because you help us to keep this thing running. You help the LSA to keep its flags flying around the world. There are hundreds of LSA flags out there, and loads of them are in every corner of the globe, all the way from Poland, all the way over, I believe, to Australia. And I believe that there was one that went to another country in the area, maybe the Philippines, if I remember correctly, and that may be the farthest around the world that we get on that side. But still, but still, thank you so much once again for support, Maud Day, because you helped that to be possible and keep on running. And also, Matthew, interestingly enough, before we move on to the next one, I heard someone say that there is an underground city here in Minneapolis. Did you see that in the comments section?
I didn't see it, but I'd believe it.
I believe it, because that hot dog guy's got to live somewhere, and it's got to be in those underground tunnels. Because, I mean, the options are limited, especially when you're running a channel of that kind of nature. You know what I mean? Like, you can't get out up in the nice places, like places like Powderhorn, places like Blaine. I mean, that would be out of the picture for you. You just couldn't live there. Yeah, if you were living there, you had to be doing some kind of a thing to be able to pay the insane rent. I mean, have you seen the rent in these places out here around Minneapolis? I mean, the places like Blaine. I mean, it's extremely expensive, Matthew. I don't know if you've looked at it much.
You gotta be paying big bucks to live out there. I'm telling you. I
mean, you got to be paying big bucks. You got to be paying big bucks. And I don't know. I mean, underground city sounds a lot more plausible for Hot Dog Man than anything else. So, I mean, I would believe it. I would believe that they'd have to have an underground city in Minneapolis, because that would be one of the mole people. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you for sharing that fact with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to JD Macco 23, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, JD Macco, for that support. He said, 2 cowboys in the desert discover a bacon tree. They thought, thank goodness, salvation. And within minutes, they were surrounded by enemies. It turned out to be a ambush. Oh, my God.
Oh, dude, I didn't even see that coming. I was like, what the hell is this building up to? But that was good.
He said, dad jokes for the win, and take one from the chat. Oh, my God.
That was, oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Man, JD Macco 23 is becoming the new Blue Flam 777. My Lord. That was actually a pretty good one. That pun got me. And I got to say, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible, help us to keep it running, and also help us to hear amazing dad jokes like that. And so, with that, I gotta say thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And thank you once again for being an absolute channel legend, JD Macco 23. And with that, Matthew, get us one from that there live chat. What do we got?
All right, so let's comb through the live chat options here, and we're going to go with this one from Nishova, who says, did you hear that North Korea just gave Putin thousands of artillery rounds, and is that true?
Thousands of artillery? South Korea giving thousands of artillery rounds. Is that what they said?
Yes. No, wait a minute. Say that again.
South Korea giving thousands of artillery rounds? Is that what I heard? Did I hear that right? You heard me?
Oh, no. They said, did you hear that North Korea just gave Putin thousands of artillery rounds, and is that true?
Yeah, we actually heard that they've given 5 million rounds to the Russians, supposedly, which I'm doubting, but we have heard that. We've been hearing that for quite a while. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And thank you so much for sponsoring that live chat once again, JD Macco 23, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here, our next super chat, is going to go to Steve T. And Steve puts in a $20 donation. Huge shout out, Steve. He says, do you think that multiple special forces, sabotage and recon teams, small, very mobile forces backed by gliding and MLRS or ATACMs could move by sea into Crimea to identify and attack supply lines and equipment from the behind?
Certainly. Now, that kind of an insertion by the Ukrainians is possible. Small special forces teams that are largely self-sustaining, that would be a possible operation that could be conducted, and that really falls within the realm of what most special forces are around the world. Ukrainian special forces are really geared for those kinds of operations, so I would say yes, that would be a brilliant way for the Ukrainians to use their special forces and get incredible results out of them, in my opinion. So, Steve T, you're hitting it dead on the nail, and I think if the Ukrainians are listening to this channel, they ought to get some ideas from you, Steve, because that was a genius one right there, and I would say that that is textbook, a perfect idea. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Steve. I hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
There you go. That's what I was looking for. Our next one here goes to Zach G. He's a G, and he puts in a $20 donation. And seriously, thank you, Zach, very much for that support. He says, I love the streams. And do you think the shortage of Russian air defenses could be due to Russia not being able to produce offensive and defensive armaments at the same time and are just focusing on attacking?
I would say that it probably is not. The thing is with the Russians is that we have been able to see that they are producing a fairly substantial amount of artillery, well, at least in terms of munitions. When I say artillery, I mean munitions, not the pieces, because the pieces are apparently a little bit difficult to produce even for the Russians. But beyond that, the shortage of air defense is largely becoming because air defense is a very fine-tuned kind of a system that requires a lot of money to produce, and not only that, a lot of high-tech components to be able to build. And that's one thing that the Russians have none of, is money or high-tech components to build these systems with. And so that's why we're seeing that a lot of the Russian airspace is being completely emptied or devoid of any kind of air defense, because they don't have the ability to replace any losses that they take currently in the war. They are very high-tech, very expensive systems, and losing them is pretty much permanent at this point. It doesn't really have to do with them focusing a lot on attacking or defending, because that supply line is more so completely different than the one for the SAM systems. So you can actually manufacture SAMs completely separate from what the frontline conditions are looking like right now, and not really have that much of an impact. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because I hope that was a fairly good answer. And also, thank you once again, Zach G, for supporting this channel and helping to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible day in and day out. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality, and it is massively appreciated that you help this channel to keep on running and enjoy it enough to find it worthwhile to support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Panama Floyd, who puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to Panama, who's the channel legend and has always supported us for a very long time. And Panama says, selfish tactical question. I've never heard that phrase before. That is very interesting. A selfish tactical question. He said, I'd say that Kursk should stay up so orcs could evacuate Crimea. And Enforcer Matt, what do you think?
I would say that, in my opinion, the Kerch Bridge could stay up. It doesn't really have that much of a strategic impact at this point, to be entirely honest. So it could serve as an evacuation corridor for Russian forces that are leaving the area. But at the same time, you also could destroy the bridge, cut everyone off from leaving, and then encircle a Russian army on the Kerch Strait and force them to surrender, because there's really no way for them to leave. You could do that as well. One or the other. Either way, it's a win-win. But that's probably why they're keeping the bridge up, so that way the Russians will have a route to leave if that ever came to being an issue, so that way they wouldn't fight as hard or take extremely drastic actions. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, and that is a very good question. And I gotta thank you so much once again for your support, Panama Floyd, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Neil Vizanant, who's also longtime channel legend, and he puts in a $20 donation. And Neil says, Ukraine is using the same tactics that I do in RTSGs and create a defensive rig around artillery, aircraft, or some other deep strike capability and force the enemy to break your defense if they want to survive.
And Neil, that is a very interesting way that you explain that right there. Now, defensive battles are the best battles to fight. They're actually the easiest to fight, believe it or not. And I also play real-time strategy games as well. I play them usually on the regimental level. And one of my favorite games in that category is Warno. And one of the ways that I play Warno is a lot like the Ukrainian army has to fight their war currently. Speaking of just, moving it into a video game realm and talking about how it would be fought in a real-time strategy game like that. Usually what I would do is in that kind of a situation where it's mostly infantry based and doesn't really have a lot of armor support, the best thing to do is rapidly advance. Of course, we're talking about a very initial battle, not like, it's been going on for months in the same battlefield, but we would move up to a specific area. We would set up infantry specifically, not a lot of infantry forces. It would mostly be ATGM forces and air defense forces. So that way you would have a lot of shielding against armored advances, and not only that, air attacks as well, at least on a short range. And then once that front line is established with some limited amounts of ATGM and air defenses, then you start to move in heavier equipment. You move in a limited number of tanks. You move in infantry that has long-range anti-tank guided missile systems like the Javelin. Although the Javelin honestly would come first before the TOWs or any other kind of ATGM, although it is an ATGM. And then after that, you start to move in larger air defense systems that have longer range. That's usually how I play my real-time strategy games, especially on a battlefield level. But I would say that is a very interesting way to fight, Neil Vizanot, is to create a defensive rig around a deep strike capability, and then force the enemy to break your defense if they want to survive. Like, that is a very interesting concept, because usually I do conduct a defensive battle, but I attempt to try and create an opening in my line, or a faint opening that looks like they can exploit it, and once they push through, I then use a whole bunch of forces that were behind the lines that they didn't see to close the gap and pretty much envelop them once they conduct their offensive. Not only did they have to expend a lot of resources to be able to get into that position, but they also have now lost a large amount of forces that had been surrounded and are going to be destroyed in detail by the rear line forces that I had sitting there in reserve waiting for them to conduct that push. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, and how I usually do things. But that is an interesting way to go about it, Neil, and I'd have to agree with you. Ukraine is using pretty similar tactics to that on a very large scale. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this time, we have a $10 super chat from Fred Matthewson. And thank you very much, Fred, for your support as well. He says, do you think there will be a coup in Russia if the war and economy continue to go south?
I think that there may be coup attempts in Russia. I don't think, and I say plural, because a lot of them will fail. Usually a lot of coup attempts normally fail. One will make it through, though, and one will succeed. So I would have to say yes. I think there will be a coup in Russia if the economy continues to fall, especially if the economy continues to fall to the point that it starts to affect the bottom line of the Russian citizenry, their basic needs like food, clothing, and things like that. If it starts to affect that level, you will start to see a massive amount of civil unrest. If it does not affect that level, you probably will not see much civil unrest. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Scott Kemp. And Scott puts in a 10. And huge thanks to you, Scott. He says, I really appreciate you too. Thanks. And still on number E.
Hey, and thank you so much once again for the support, and Scott, and helping this channel to keep on running. We really appreciate you, Scott, and we appreciate you being here pretty much every single night. And of course, thank you for doing that, and thank you for enjoying the channel enough to support it. And also, you're still on that number E, on that hashtag
number E.
Man, that number E. But still, with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again, Scott Kemp, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
Indeed, and huge thanks, Scott, for the kind words as well. And our next one here goes to Rob Wilkes, who puts in a $10 donation. He says, if the Russian banking collapse is prolonged, Putin's entire government is done. And aside from the obvious, that will deprive the people of their pensions, and they are 100% reliant upon those pensions.
And I completely agree with that. You are absolutely right. And observing the situation astutely, Rob, I would agree with you. And I would have to say that if the situation does continue on the way it is, and things continue to get worse. While it can affect the higher levels, and it won't really pose that much of an issue, like I was saying just a moment ago, if it starts to affect the lower levels of Russian society and their basic needs, that will be when government change does occur. And that will be a wildly fragile, if not extremely dangerous situation for the Russian Federation. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Herp Derp NV, who puts in a $10 donation and says, let's hear Mike Tyson talk about the pathetic and desperate the haters are to attack the Enforcer channel, and Iron Mike is the man to burn the hot dogs.
Hey, don't talk about a hot dog. We are. Listen, folks. I saw some people going, it's been 2 years, and he's still at it, so we're not stopping. A hit piece will be like, look, let me say this really quickly. Oh, Jack. No hit pieces have been out for, I think, like, what, 3 weeks, man? Well, no. Actually, there was a hit piece, like, just a few days ago. Actually, funnily enough.
Yeah, it was just a hit piece, man. A waiter just served it up a few days ago.
Yeah.
They served it up cold.
Yeah, hot and ready. Oh, like a Little Caesar's pizza. All right, so the thing is that for 2 years now, because some people have been saying it's been going on for 2 years, and isn't that terrible? But for 2 years now, we have sat there and went every time that guy would shut his mouth for a little bit, okay, we're not going to say anything about it anymore, and I'm sure it will go away. And then the guy would come back and do it again. So at this point, we've learned not to be stupid and stop talking about it. Might as well just keep on joking on the guy while he's around, because he's never going to quit. He's just going to keep coming back at it again and again. So we're not going to stop joking about it. That's one thing that I know for certain. But beyond that, Mike Tyson's got a couple of words to say about this. That little guy with his limp noodle wrists, he wouldn't be able to do shit to nobody. Like, he's a rat piece of shit. Like, honestly, just a rat piece of shit. And the haters are all terrible people. They shitty people. They sit there and they just say stuff about this channel like we don't have any analysis. I have analysis. I know what I'm doing. And Matthew knows what he's doing. If we didn't know what we was doing, why in the world is our channel so popular? We got 1,000.
Listen, Mike. That's enough from you. We've got this down pat. There's no question. This is the best. Of course, it's the best because it's the bestest. It's the biggest. And I'm telling you, it's just look at the cameras. You see, they're turning the cameras off. They don't want you to hear this. It's the best. And also, Hot Dog Man, he sure is ugly. Oh, there's a lot of subject matter there, but I'm gonna let it go.
I hope we address that well, like Matthew and me doing that. And I thank you so much for once again for support. And I'll listen. I'm going to be completely frank with everyone because I saw two people earlier. One of them I know in particular has been around a really long time. They're like, stop it. And I saw Matthew respond to some of them, and I'm so sorry, everyone. Because back in the day, we tried to extend 1 million olive branches. We sent 1 million emails to this clown idiot who's threatened us physically, who's doxed us, who's harassed us for 2 years now, and made our lives a living hell every way they can. They had people calling up our law school when we were going to law school, saying that we were going to do something terrible at the school, trying to get us swatted by the university police. They tried to do the same thing when we were at UAB. They've been trying to make our lives a living hell the entire time that we've been here. I'm not giving that guy a single inch. That guy is a sick bastard. His community is a bunch of sick, irreprehensible people. And I'm never going to stop ratting on that guy and making jokes about him. And now that for some reason we looked at his home city, and nothing in particular, he wants to make it sound like he's the victim. Like, if you want to see how much of a victim Hot Dog Man is, why don't you go click on his channel and go look at the video that's literally right below that one, and it's literally a thumbnail with a picture of our parents' house that we're living in on it. Like it's there. Like, we were doxxed a year ago on the thumbnail. Like, you can't sit there and try and be the victim when you're a shitty person. Like, you can't. You get what's coming to you. And nothing even came to the guy in the first place. And now he's whining like he's a little baby. After and then on top of that, another thing, just to share with all of y'all that y'all don't know about Hot Dog Man. And if you want to know who Hot Dog Man is, we're not mentioning his name ever. He doesn't even deserve the mention. So if you want to know, you can ask around on like other channels or something like that who Hot Dog Man is. I'm sure you'll get an answer. But Anyways, Hot Dog Man emailed us, I think it was like, what, a month ago, threatening both of us physically with harm and saying that he would realign our jaws and pretty much try and either beat us to near to death or to death, one or the other. So I'm not giving that guy any kind of slack at all. The guy is a sick shit. Like, I'm not going to beat around the bush on that. And I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, you know, like, he's not saying anything right now, so let's be the whoa little victims and wait for him to send another little email or send another hit piece and just let this crap go on this guy's terms. No, I'm very intent on this point. I want this guy to not be happy running a YouTube channel. Eventually he'll quit, and I'll be very happy for that day. But with that, I hope that
also got blocked by everybody's favorite YouTubers, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like go on like what I feel like about other YouTubers and stuff, but he literally got blocked by everybody except for like a couple of them because he went berserk on them. So I think everybody's gotten a taste of the insanity at this point from that bastard. And it's just going to continue. It's not going to stop. But, you know, we make a joke here and there and stuff like that, but we don't even harp on it. Like, tonight's kind of rare. This is one of the first times I've ever heard the Enforcer or me address it in a very long time. Because we don't even address it anymore. And with that, I'm going to stop right there because we don't address it. So what am I doing, man?
What are we doing? But anyways, I had to address it because I saw two people go, please stop, because I brought it up as like one joke earlier, and I was like, no. It's like, we're not stopping. Like, sorry, if you think we're ever going to stop on that, I'm very sorry. And I would save y'all the disappointment, and I would tell y'all to go watch another channel. Because we will throw out jokes like that. I'm not going to be contained from doing that. Because for the hell we've gone through, we're owed to make a joke here or there. And if you don't like that, sorry, but there are other options for you. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Herp Derp NV, because folks like you help to make this channel possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to another old guard. It's Sully Canuck, who puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout to you, Sully, for always supporting as well. He says, just a thought from an old boomer. Canada doesn't have any nukes of our own, but I wonder if the USA has a row of them up north in our country to retaliate should the Ruskies attack us, and that their nukes will fly over the North Pole.
And that is a good question, Sully Canuck. And let's see. But I wonder, the United States doesn't really have a row of them up north, because the thing about nuclear deterrence is that we don't really have to send the nukes straight over where they are. We actually have all of our nuclear silos out in the U.S. Midwest, around the areas of Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota, Colorado, Kansas, Montana, and North Dakota. And if anything was to happen, we order those to launch, and while they're not in Canada, they are in America. They will fly right over Canada, and they will make it into the into the Russian Federation. Soviet Union would be the old term, but the Russian Federation about the same time that their nukes would in travel time, even if they were to hit Canada. So we do have that kind of defense, but we also have other kinds of defense. We have tactical nuclear weapons available in Germany. We also have nuclear ballistic missile submarines that right now are carrying nuclear-tipped Trident warheads that can launch at the Russian Federation from practically anywhere, and the Russians would not know where those submarines are at any given moment, meaning that it would be an absolute surprise. So going off of that, we do have a pretty good solid nuclear deterrent, Sully Canuck, and if you're scared about Canada being on the short end of the stick in a nuclear exchange, don't you worry. America has both of us covered and has an umbrella over the entire American continent from nuclear attacks, or at least a nuclear deterrence for both Canada and America. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Sully Canuck. I hope that does address that well. And also, I got to say, huge shout out to all of our Canadian viewers who are here tonight, because all of y'all are incredibly cool folks, just like you, Sully Canuck. Our Lee Spring Army Navy, Royal Canadian Navy veteran. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Paramecium13, who puts in a $10 donation. A huge shout out to Paramecium for that. He says Putin wants peace, as long as it includes a piece of Ukraine. And also, look at the two translations of the Russian word NMP. It's like the backwards in.
That would be like IMP. Let's see here. Sadly, I can't put that in because I don't have a Cyrillic like keyboard to be able to put that in.
You just copy and paste it.
Wait, that's mir, Matthew. That's the Russian word mir right there. I actually just saw it. It's not imp. It's
You're the one who said that. You're the one who said it stood for that. I was just repeating you.
Man, I was just sitting there, and you said it looked like a backwards in and then an MP, and I was like, that sounds like imp. But that's mir. which is world. And let me go Russian mir. And so let me go see if I can. There we go. Here we go. Here it is, the Russian world. If you type in Russian mir, that's what you get. The Russian world, or Russian community, is a concept in political doctrine usually defined as a sphere of military, political, and cultural influence of Russia. This sometimes is also phrased as Pax Russica, in parallel to Pax Romana, and as a counterweight to the Pax Britannica of the 19th century and the Pax Americana after World War II, which is the American world that we kind of live in. You know what I mean? But that is it. And I got to thank you so much for sharing that with us, Paramecium 13, because that is what the Russians are always talking about. Whenever you hear them talk about Ruski Mir, it's the Russian national ambition of doing something like that. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Paramecium 13. I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Cliff H, who puts in a $10 donation and says, LSA all day, every day.
LSA all day, every day, baby. Cliff H, my boy, my baba boy. I got to thank you so much once again for the support and being a long-time member of the Lee Spring Army, because it is folks like you who make the Lee Spring Army possible. And I thank you so much for supporting this channel tonight, because you're helping the flag of the Lee Spring Army to continue to fly high. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Cody Wilson, who puts in a 10 and says, take one from the chat. And we shall, Cody. We shall take one from the chat in honor of your super chat. And thank you very much for that support. And the live chat question here, while I put a red box on one of them, I forgot to put a box on it. This one's going to go to W13RD guy, who says, how long before the Russians have to line up in the government bread lines?
Not that long. I'm going to be entirely honest. It probably will be a matter of months, and we will probably start to see government bread lines like that returning. In my honest opinion, it will not be that long. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support, Cody Wilson, and sponsoring that live chat and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Andy L, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Andy, for your support as well. He says, ... Russia, help Ukraine. Take the question from the chat.
And Russia, what are you doing? But still, thank you so much for the support, Andy L. Thank you for being an absolute legend. And thank you so much for giving us those 2 EOTechs back in the day. That was incredibly nice of you. And we still thank you greatly for that. That was such a kind gift. And we will make sure to take some questions from the live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
So this one goes to David Long, who says, if Russians did surrender at the bridge area, does Ukraine even have prison camps for the war prisoners?
No. They mostly would turn into a stockade kind of a thing. But the thing is that with prisoners, you only have to provide for them as long as you can provide for them. If you can't, then they just kind of starve. And that's how it works. Like, a lot of people are gonna be like, wow, that sounds cruel. Yeah, but life is cruel sometimes. That sounded really amiss. Let me put it this way. If you have so many Russian prisoners that they start to strain the food resources in Ukraine, and you have to pick in between feeding the Ukrainian public or the Russian prisoners, the rules of war actually allow you to pick the Ukrainian public and let the Russian prisoners starve. That's the rules of war. That's how they work. And so they wouldn't really be able to take care of all of them, but it wouldn't really matter. And unfortunately, what would be going on in the background, like I'm saying, would be unfortunate, but there's not really a lot that they could do in that kind of a situation. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for asking a really interesting question there. Kind of a bit of a morbid answer, but I still think that y'all appreciate the honesty. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Andy L, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Butchie777, who puts in a $10 donation. It says, like zoink Scoob, don't come knocking if the buhankas are rocking like a private time. Take a succulent live chat.
Shoigu! And like zoink Scoop, don't come knocking if the buhankas are rocking. I don't know. That actually did not sound that bad. I don't think, like, not to be a narcissist or anything, but with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to take a succulent Chinese meal and show you. And so, Matthew, what we got from the live chat?
And this question goes to Bobo Yuzala, who says, do you think the people of Belarus may turn on Russia, or have they drank the orc Kool-Aid?
They drank that orc Kool-Aid. And also, they would turn on Lukashenko before they turn on Russia. So I would say they got that orc Kool-Aid. They got that Kool-Aid up in them. And also, it wouldn't be focused towards Russia. It would be focused towards the Belarusian government. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat well. And thank you once again for the support, Butch 777, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Carrie Ann LSA, the first couple of the LSA, and also a big shout out to Nick as well. They put in a $5 donation and said, take a minute and stand up to stretch, drink some water, eat a snack. LSA for life.
And thank you so much for the support, Carrie Ann. And I got to give a huge credit to that. If you have the ability to do that during the stream, because I have to sit down for 3 hours straight most times, and I don't really get a lot of a break most of the time. Like during the speech tonight, I really didn't get a break that much, but I had to put one up just so that way I could get a little bit of breathing room. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Carrie Ann, first couple of the LSA, and thank you once again for support and being here with us tonight and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to James, who put in a $5 donation and did not leave a comment. But thank you very much, James, for supporting that channel and helping to keep us running. And we also have a 5 from CK Bold, who throws in the regular and says, take a live chat question. Hey! And we shall grab a live chat question, the number 5. And this one goes to Christian Cruz, who says, did you guys see the new Rheinmetall / Lockheed GMARS, the HIMARS, but much better and better with double the rockets?
What? The Rheinmetall.
It's a Rheinmetall collab with Lockheed for the GMARS.
Rheinmetall GMARS. Let me go look at this thing. Let me go look at this thing. What the hell? Rheinmetall GMARS. What the? Oh my lord! They put it on a man cat, Matthew. They put it on a man cat. My goodness. I'm not even like. It really is just an M270 on a man cat. That's it.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. It's that is a much better platform though, I think, for it.
Let me see here if I can get the man cat. There we go. So I'll show you here. Remember, Matthew, the man cat? It's this truck here. Like it's that same truck. But then they put
it looks like it's been outfitted a little bit. It's got extra wheels on it.
Yeah, but then they just took the launcher from an M270 right here, and then they just put that onto the back of a man cat. They did modify the man cat a good bit, but it's really not like a new system. It's more like an amalgamation of the two. And I think that they're trying to get the maneuverability of the M142, but with the firepower of an M270. But I would have to say, I'm not like discrediting this or anything. It's just that for some reason I was thinking it would be like other Rheinmetall vehicles and it would be like completely new from the ground up. But that is really cool. Like, I really like this idea because I'm really into the idea of wheeled artillery these days. It is far more mobile and a lot faster in the shoot and scoot role. So it is certainly going to be the artillery of the future. And so I would say this thing is actually really good. And I've never seen this thing before. Thank you for sharing it. And I think that this thing has a lot of potential. The firepower of an M270, but most likely the speed and maneuverability on the battlefield of an M142 HIMARS, which means a lot. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you, CK Bold, for sponsoring the live chat. So that way we can take a look at this amazing mix of the Man-Cat truck and then also the M270's launcher. Pretty cool. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And Barry Woodward puts in a 5 and says, do we know what % of residences have self-defense arms, as in the Second Amendment, in Ukraine?
Sadly, we don't. I believe the number was actually incredibly low pre-war because, unlike America, gun laws are usually incredibly restrictive around most areas of the world. And that's something that a lot of people around the world are very used to, but in America, people are not used to that, generally because we have a completely different way that our laws are structured here in this country. The right to bear arms is actually written into the Constitution. So unlike other countries where the right to bear arms wasn't explicitly allowed within the constitutional framework, meaning like for Britain, they went from having guns to really not having guns overnight, and it was a very simple flip. In America, it's a completely different situation because it's largely ingrained into the actual Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which are generally considered sacred by most of the American public. So you can't completely remove the right, but you can restrict them in different ways and forms. And that's kind of like giving the most neutral political overview of that I can give about gun ownership in America versus the rest of the world. But moving on into Ukraine, I believe that pre-war Ukrainian gun ownership was low. And let me find out. Ukrainian gun ownership. Let's see. So, Ukrainian law allows firearm ownership on a may-issue basis. With approximately 10 civilian firearms per 100 people, Ukraine is the 88th most armed country in the world per capita and 22nd overall. So it was actually a little bit on up there, kind of interestingly. So let's see what the actual list is. So I'd be damned. The Falkland Islands is number 2. Falkland Islands, mogging on them Argentinians since 1982. Impressive stuff. By the way, no disrespect to any Argentinians here, but beyond that, they have 2,000 guns in the Falklands and 3,000 people. So they get a pretty high civilian to gun ownership ratio, probably because they're on the Falkland Islands. Yemen's pretty high up there. Canada's actually on up there as well, interestingly enough. They actually are number 7 in the world, at least in ratio of firearms per 100 people. Lebanon's on up there as well. That's interesting. I wonder who's upping that number. But let's see here. Austria, Liechtenstein. So let's see. So actually, Ukraine is really, really low on the list when you look at this, because France and Germany, which are usually known as countries that are fairly restrictive on gun rights, at least here in America, are number 26 and 28, and Ukraine was number 88, all the way down here, sandwiched in between Denmark and South Africa. So you can kind of get an idea. It's a little tough to get a gun in Ukraine. There were only 4.4 million guns in Ukraine in 2017 for a population of 44.4 million people, meaning that literally for every 100 people, there were 10 guns, or for every 10 people, there was 1 gun. But in America, it's different. You see, we're the only country in the world that has more guns than people. There are 393,347,000 registered firearms. This is inaccurate. The 1,073,000 registered firearms, I believe that number is inaccurate. Because the thing is that all Form 4473s document what firearms there are. At least from my understanding, I may be wrong with that. I'm not a really big knowledgeable person on how the ATF works. But beyond that, there is around 393,347,000 firearms in the United States. Meaning that there are 120 and a half guns for every 100 people in America. It's the only country in the world like that. So you can see that Ukraine was on the completely opposite end. What is the least armed country in the world?
North Korea.
Taiwan.
Taiwan? No, that's a terrible country to be unarmed like that. That's awful.
They only have 10,000 guns in civilian hands in Taiwan.
Oh, dear.
Dude. Crazy, man. It's literally a ratio of 0 guns per 100 people. That is sad. They need some. We need.
What is that Holy See? Do you see that? Holy See.
That's the Vatican, man. You know the Vatican. You know
why they call it the Holy See? I've never heard it called that before.
It's always been called that.
I've never heard that.
You really you haven't? Like, no joke. I thought you were kidding.
No, I'm like serious. Like, I've never heard it called that.
I don't know why it's called the Holy See. I don't know the explanation behind it, but I have heard it been called the Holy See before. And I was like, what is that? And I did what you did, and I was like, oh, that's apparently the Vatican. Okay. But let's see. Who else is down here on this list? North Korea is actually 220. Like, I can't, like, apparently you have 76,000 civilian firearms in North Korea. I don't know where they get that number, though. But let's see. Japan has 377,000. Ethiopia has the same number. Let's see here. What else do we have down here that's interesting? Palestine. I'm doubting that one. I don't know why, y'all, but I'm kind of doubting that number a little bit.
I mean Gaza?
No, Palestine in general. Like, you know, like the unrecognized state of Palestine, which includes the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what they're calling Palestine now. Okay.
That's what's always been called, man. Like, what the hell is up with you, man? Like, anyways.
I mean, it's unrecognized for a reason, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's unrecognized, but, you know, if you want to call it Palestine, it's the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. But anyways, Peru is on down there, and Cuba is on down there. Poland is way down there as well. And Romania is too. Romania. Haiti. I don't think they need like if anyone doesn't need guns, barbecue doesn't need guns. Okay, like being honest here. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a very special guest returning once again. It is Duncan VR. He's back, and he puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support. And he has the animal noises. I haven't got to do this in a long time. He says, I'm still lurking here. Ba ba. What a succulent Chinese mule fund. Happy marmot to you. Ba woof, quack, bing shilling, meow.
And I cannot believe it is the return of a legend. And I got to thank you so much for the return, Duncan VR. And I got to thank you so much for the support. And I got to thank you for throwing in your traditional animal noises. Because a stream is not complete without those. No lie. No joke. And I got to thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. I say. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you for being here tonight with us. That is incredibly cool. And thank you for the support. And we are on to that next one.
And that next one goes to Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock is back once again, Captain.
Hey!
And he puts in a $10 donation. He says, I missed the beginning of the stream. And any news on when the F-16s will get busy?
Sadly not. And also, that's something I completely have forgotten about, at least for tonight, is that the F-16s are supposed to be there by now, and we have not really gotten any word on that. So, sadly, we don't have any information on that at all, and it's kind of fallen off the radar for me. But we will start looking into that a lot more and seeing if that's the case. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for the support, Mr. Spock. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, I have a feeling we'll be hearing in a short while. Oh, we're sorry. It got pushed back until November. That's it. November. It'll be here in November. It's like, come on now. So how many times are you going to push it back without people eventually saying, hey, like, what are y'all doing with that? Because you keep pushing it back saying it's training. Then you say, I need to get some equipment there. And then you say X, Y, and Z. But it's like you keep making promises and you're not following through on it. But yet you want Ukraine to believe that the security guarantee is going to be something that they can count on. It's like, if we're not following through with stuff, they're not going to believe anything. So it's like, what good is the security guarantee if we can't even like uphold the F-16 agreement? But you know, I digress. I'm going to admonish and digress. But anyways, this one goes to Shannon H, who puts in a 5 and says, thanks for the updates.
And thank you so much, Shannon H, for enjoying the updates and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because you make it possible for us to keep updating everyone. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Hector Alexander Monk. And he puts in a 5 and says, according to the attacks of the Ruski anti-air defense systems, don't you think that the AC-130 Spectre could be put in use together with the F-16s?
Not really. The AC-130 Spectre requires complete air superiority to operate, which would never really be achieved in battlefield conditions in Ukraine due to manpads, meaning that it would be at a constant threat of being shot down if it was ever used for its intended purpose, which is in a combat role. So I would generally have to say I'm not a big fan of an AC-130 arriving in Ukraine. It would be a really big target. But, you know, like, if they were able to achieve complete air supremacy and destroy every manpad on the ground, they could use one. It's just that would be really hard to do. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one also goes to Hector Alexander Monk. He puts in another 5 and says, Pudler's head must be swole after the air defense attacks.
And Pudler's head is swole. I mean, it's just swole from, like, the cancer or whatever he's got. But yeah, it's swole. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Neil Vizanon. And Neil puts in another $5 donation. And thank you very much, Neil, for supporting the channel as always. And we appreciate it very much. And sadly, we cannot read off the super chat there. It's a little bit too spicy to read off. But thank you very much for that support. And moving on to our next one here, we have one from LZA AK47, who puts in a 5 and says, my brother and I love the streams, and he showed me your channel, and I can't get enough. And keep doing what you're doing.
Hey, thank you so much, LZA AK47. I like that name. AK47 is not a bad rifle. No, some people are about to be like, no, it's bad. It's not bad. I mean, honestly, I I've been able to shoot all the platforms, well, the big three, the AK, the FAL, and the AR, and I'm not gonna lie, y'all, all of them are pretty good. They're just good in different ways. I can't really crap on any single one of them, though. You know, it's kind of up to preference. Honestly, if it wasn't for the cost of 308, I actually like the FAL the most, just because it's a 308. And it's a really nice, big, beefy rifle with a lot of firepower. I really like that. But if we were talking about a modern-day rifle for the modern age with a smaller caliber, I would go with the AR platform. Like, you know, it's hardly winning out, though, over the AK-74s, to be entirely honest. But it wins out just because you can add more optics, you can add all kinds of stuff to it, and not only that, I just generally find that the design is a little bit more polished than the AK-74. Not to say the AK-74 is bad, it's pretty good. But I would just lean a little bit over to the AR side in the end, just a little bit. But with that, thank you so much once again for supporting the channel and also throwing in a cool name like that so I can rabbit hole. But still, thank you so much for being introduced to these streams and enjoying them a lot. We put in so much effort. We put our heart and souls into this every single day to try and make sure that these shows are as top quality as they can be, and also our video updates and summaries are, and I gotta thank you greatly for once again supporting this channel, helping it to be possible, and making this thing a reality, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to LSA Master Sergeant Figment. He puts in a $2 donation. He says, LSA, hit that like button. That's an order.
And that is an order from the Master Sergeant. Y'all have got to follow that. Y'all got to hit that like button. And I got to thank you greatly, LSA Sergeant Figment, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because you are one of the people who helps to make this thing possible. And I got to thank you so much once again for sending all of that cool IDF challenge coins, patches, and everything else in between. That was incredibly kind of you, and we thank you so much for it. And also thank you for getting a flag and a patch. It is great to know that we have amazing folks like you here behind this channel, and I can't thank you enough for being a massive part of the Lee Spring Army and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to A Star, who puts in a $2 donation and says, "Hi, Fatsos."
Oh, hello. Oh, no. I'm just kidding, A Star. And I got to thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jaya Turner, who puts in a 2 and says, "Missoula's downtown is built on top of the old one."
Missoula? Where is Missoula?
I'm not sure where Missoula is at.
Missoula, Montana. I'm guessing this is it. Maybe? Let's look at that downtown. Was it built on the old downtown? Maybe? Maybe? I wouldn't be able to tell from these pictures. I'm doubting it, me personally. Where is this in Montana anyways? Oh, this is way up there in like the mountains. If that is true, I believe you. Sadly, I have no way to know that this is the right Missoula. But let's see here. We got that Bitterroot up around here. But anyways, my anaconda don't. But anyways, I'm about to get caught up trying to read stuff in Montana. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Jaya Turner, of course, support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for sharing that fun fact with us. And with that, we are on to the final super chat of this segment. And then we're going to be moving on into the live chats.
And that tells me you're looking at the spreadsheet. And our last one here goes to, say what?
Amen, brother. Amen.
Oh, amen, brother. This one goes to Jim Sellers, who puts in a 2 and says, "Much love."
And much love to you, Jim Sellers, and thank you for the support. Because it is always good to know that folks are behind us here on this channel and back us up through and through, and know that when we do things, we're doing them for a reason. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's now time for us to move on into the live chats. Some of y'all may realize I sound a little low on energy. I had a good bit of coffee tonight, but for some reason, the wind's out of my sails. It left around towards the end of the news segment. And I ran out of energy. I don't know what it is. It's not that I'm exhausted, like, mentally. It feels like I'm exhausted physically. So I'm going to be cutting the live chat question a little bit short tonight. We're probably going to run it for about 7 minutes, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream. And so with that, we are on to the first one.
All right, so up first, we, of course, have our Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight, it was Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J., Rumpelstiltskin, and David Millsaps. He says, the Morse code for today reads, Russia is in for all kinds of unsurprises this week, and maybe they will even more to come, and LLT, LSA.
And that is the sound of money. And y'all got that down on the nail. That was the jackpot, and y'all got the Morse code message correct. Correct. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 842nd day of the war. That is absolutely incredible, and it's wonderful to know that y'all continue to get that right day in and day out. And so with that, thank y'all so much once again for y'all's incredible efforts. I say. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is actually from Jim Sellers, who threw in a $2 super chat, and he said, but of course, good sir, and but of course. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running, Jim Sellers, and making this thing a reality. And with that, we're back into the live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
So this live chat question is going to go to W13RD guy. He says, how many mercenaries are fighting in Ukraine from Burundi, Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda?
A very small number. We believe it's only a few hundred of them combined amongst all the countries, because the Russians are conducting recruiting efforts there, but from what we understand, they don't really provide massive net results. It's a really small number that's coming from there, and they're very rare to see on the front lines as well. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. I say. And thank you once again for asking a really interesting question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Duncan VR. He says, is Argentina providing fighter aircraft that were used in the Falklands War?
Yes, they're actually fighting the Dassault Etendard. And let me go find it. Etendard. Boom. Right here. This is the Dassault Etendard. And this one is actually being used by the French Marines in this picture. But I'll show you an Argentina one, which would have Armada written on the side. And hold up. This says that they're the only operator. That's not true. Hang on. Wait, hang on. Is there another version of the Dassault Etendard? There's no way that there can be, because I remember it just being this one. Let's see. Maybe it's the Dassault Etendard 2. No, it's not. Maybe it's the 6. What the hell? Oh, maybe it's this one. Oh, yeah, okay, so it is this one. Okay, so let me go down here and let me get you the Argentinian one. Here is an Argentinian Super Etendard, which is the one that they're going to be getting. And so, yes, they are going to be providing Ukraine with jets that actually were used during the Falklands War by the Argentinian government, which is really kind of cool in a way, and really neat to see these aircraft get a second life, because they were already in such an important war of the late 20th century, and now they're going to be in a really important war of the 21st century. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, and this one goes to Kim Bennett, who says, when F-16s achieve air superiority, wouldn't adding A-10s to the ground assault be a good idea? And they were built to protect ground infantry and are cheaper to keep in the air, so what about it?
Yeah, you could do that. Like, once air superiority is achieved, you could really throw anything you want in. I just wouldn't throw in an AC-130 because that would be a man-pad magnet, but an A-10 would probably not be that much of a man-pad magnet. So yeah, you could do something like that for sure. An A-10 would be usable in that kind of a role. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And that this one goes to Julian Britt, who says, in the event of an invasion on the U.S., if possible, LOL, not possible, probably not, Julian. He says, do you think we would be able to form militias bigger than most countries' armies with the amount of guns that we've got?
Oh, no doubt. We have more guns than citizens in this country. So yes, we would be able to form the biggest militias the world has ever seen if the U.S. government ever called upon them. Because it wouldn't be like random militias, like Bubba's militia. It would be like the state of Alabama's militia, and that would be what would be raised. So yes, we would be able to produce massive ones. I mean, the entire state of Alabama would become a militia overnight for the most part. About it wouldn't be 5.5 million people exactly. It'd be more like 2 million people in Alabama would probably be eligible for militia service, most likely. But still, that is pretty wild when you think about it, because that's bigger than the Chinese army just in one go right there. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is David Long once again. He says, if Russia was going to use a tactical nuke, where do you think that would occur? And do you think that Russia will launch it, or will a Russian proxy use it?
If they ever launched a tactical nuclear weapon, it would be where they're getting the most resistance, most likely around Avdiivka or Bakhmut, or in the area of Vovchansk right now. They most likely would be launched directly by Russian forces, as a use of a tactical nuclear weapon by a proxy would not be a good look, and would immediately draw a proxy into the conflict, and then it would lead them to getting hit pretty badly. On top of that, there's not really a lot of proxy forces that would be able to fire off a nuclear weapon in support of the Russians. So it most likely would be fired off directly by the Russian Federation itself, and the consequences would immediately follow, not just from Ukraine. Well, really, there wouldn't be any consequences to follow from Ukraine. They really wouldn't be able to do a lot to that in response, but the West would immediately respond with consequences. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an absolutely insane night. We reached a peak of 9.8 thousand live viewers here, which is absolutely insane. And not only that, 85,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. I've got to say that we are always humbled and honored every single night to look at those numbers and know that so many of y'all come here and watch this stream. It means a great deal to us, and I know it means a lot to y'all to be able to hear the news from a channel that y'all hopefully enjoy. And if y'all did, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment, because we are here 6 days a week, every day but Monday at the exact same time covering this news. And so with that, it is time for us to end. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die, and I will see you all for the Sunday night fundraiser tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Good night, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And also, tomorrow night is actually not the fundraiser. It's actually Saturday night.
Never mind. Sorry. Sorry.
But with that, thank you, folks, for another great stream once again tonight. Slava Ukraine, Iram Slava, and that messed me all up on my outro segment. But thank you all once again, seriously, for all the support. And we'll see you midday, hopefully, tomorrow for the Short War Summary, if there's enough news to cover. And also tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the Nightly War News stream. And with that, thank you all, and good night.
And also, by the way, everyone, that tells you how tired I am. I confused today for Saturday. Tomorrow's Saturday.
Whoa, Jack!
Whoa, Jack! Whoa! What the hell's going on?
The Himalayas!
Oh, man! I'm telling you what. But anyways, we'll see y'all around, and good night.
Good night.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Spring on me shore.